on my mind.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of The Boxing Show. With me, your host, Rob Tebbutt. As always, I'd like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, I am joined this week by the usual Mr. Andy Clarke and a special guest, analyst, co-host, the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World, Chris Billam-Smith. Chris, nice of you to join us. We tried to get the world's best cruiserweight in the world, but Joe Patar is busy. So thanks very much for stopping by.
Is that all just because of this hat?
So just get this out of the way first and foremost. Chris, as well as being the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World, is also the official George Groves Boxing Club ambassador.
Well, Fighter of the Year, I think, actually, as well.
Fighter of the Year as well. On there. All seriousness, nice to see you, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. I'll try and fill Barry's shoes with my wit or lack of.
It should be fine. Barry only wears a size 5, so I think you'll be okay. Andy, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Good. Did you have a busy weekend off?
No, I had the weekend off. I went to see my mum and dad, but I did actually watch Ryder live.
Did you stay up or did you get up?
I got up. Our little daughter kind of kicked off at exactly the right time. So that woke me up. I had a look at the time and just thought, while my wife is feeding her, you know, she's not going to mind if I just start watching some boxing, is she?
Hey,
who could mind that?
Start them young.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. How about you, Chris?
It was good.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think, did the little man did wake up around that time, actually. But I just value my sleep too much, and I soon went back to sleep with him in the spare room. So, yeah, I didn't watch it live, but I have watched the Ryder fight. Chilled weekend, back in full training now. So it was sort of like the last weekend to little man to football, and he's loving that. So it was the last proper sort of last week's been spending time with him before the absence starts.
The absence starts indeed. And before we come on to obviously this past weekend and previewing Buatsi and Azeez this weekend, let's talk about yourself. I know you hate talking about yourself, but let's do it anyway. What have you got for us? Obviously we saw about a week and a half ago news about yourself and a certain Mr. Riakporhe potentially or apparently boxing again at some point in the near future. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I think that fight's next. That's about all the news I have at the moment. Be looking at April, May time, so which is kind of what I've sort of thought it'd be all along. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for that fight. It's one that a lot of people have been calling for, and yeah, it's just really gets me motivated.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to point any fingers, but Richard Riakporhe did vote for the boxing show for the sports podcast of the year. So, we're not playing any favourites over here, are we, Andy? But
no, I mean, our allegiances can be bought very, very easily.
Very, very easily. I'm always open
Andy's
to a bribe.
For someone the other day.
The book. Yeah, the book's been getting plugged all over the place at the minute. Books everywhere, Andy.
It is. Just get ready for more of it over the next few months is all I'll say. I'll let people have a break from it every now and again. I'm just trying to hit that right formula where I saturate people with it and beat people around the head with it, but not go too far where they just feel like they're actually going to start burning it in the street because I'm talking about it too much.
Hey, listen, man, if they pay for it, they can do whatever they want with it. It's all good. You can burn it, you can boil it, whatever you want. Enter the Boxing Show 10 for 10% off Andy's new book coming out soon. Knockout by Andy Clarke. You've heard all about it. Go and get those pre-orders in. Right, okay, let's start with this past weekend. I don't know why I look at this. There's never anything on here, by the way. This is just YouTube, but I look at it because it makes me look intelligent. But anyway, this past weekend, Andy, going to come to you first. The fighting city, I'm still looking at it. The fighting city of Belfast was rocking for Lewis Crocker against Jose Felix. Bit of a one-sided main event with Lewis Crocker obviously coming in slightly heavier than the 147-pound limit, as we always like to do. Let's talk about the nitty and gritty and what goes into that and the reasons why he failed the weight or missed the weight at the weekend.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because this is something that a lot of people watching this will know about, but some people won't, which is basically 3 days before a championship fight under British Boxing Board of Control rules, you'll have a weigh-in and you need to be within 3% of your fighting weight. So I did the maths earlier on. I'm not doing this off the top of my head, although I'll probably now get it wrong. But if you're boxing at welterweight, 147 pounds, that means you will need to be 151.41, I think, or under on the Wednesday. And if you don't make it, and I had a fight a few years ago between Sam Eggington and Frankie Gavin, again at welterweight, where Frankie Gavin didn't make it. They will give you a weight that you're not allowed to go under. You won't be allowed to make the championship weight because they'll deem it to be unsafe to lose that amount of weight in that amount of time. These are the checks that are put in place to try and make sure that people don't crash too much weight too late, which reduces the your hydration, the fluid around your brain, basically. So it's all about fighter welfare. So they would have told him, I don't know what the exact figure was, but given that he weighed in at 150, I'd imagine they would have told him that he couldn't go below that, or he couldn't go below 149.5 maybe. And that's how that is. It's quite unusual for somebody to miss their Wednesday check weight. I don't know whether he is growing out of the weight or whether that's something that's been spoken about with him previously or not, but I was surprised. I was surprised by it. And it was unfortunate because Felix was already coming up in weight. So it was an uphill task for him, we felt, originally. And then it just got that bit more difficult. And you've always felt like the fight would go ahead because Jose Felix has come a long way.
Yeah.
And if you don't box, you don't get paid. And he will have been compensated, I'm guessing, for taking the fight anyway. But yeah, it took the edge off it for me.
Yeah. Lewis Crocker said, so obviously he boxed Tyrone McKenna in December of last year. So he said that the turnaround was quite quick. He said that from the start of the camp when he accepted the fight, he didn't think he'd be able to make 147 safely. So prioritising his health and yada, 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 all that good stuff. Didn't try and make the weight. Chris, have you ever, what's your kind of, your feeling about the check weights? Do you ever have any? Have you ever had any in your career where you've been close to it? I know the Chamberlain fight was a very short kind of turnaround for you. Did you have any weight issues around then?
That's probably the most I've had to lose in a camp. I was quite a lot over. I think I started about 6 weeks out, about 12 kilo over, so like 2 stone over. But soon lost a lot of the weight and never had issues making the weight. And, you know, I think you talk about welfare there of the fighter, but what about the other fighter?
Felix, welfare. Yeah, that's
Felix is coming up in weight, but I mean, I guess that's a bit of home advantage. It would have been interesting if that was the other way round and Felix, you know, missed his check weight and then comes to miss the check weight and they say, oh, you can only come in at this, then what? But Crocker was coming up in weight, for example. It'd be interesting to know what happens in that situation. But no, for me, I've never had trouble making weight, and the quick turnaround would usually benefit a fighter because they wouldn't blown up. But that being said, if you didn't know straight away when the turnaround was, and then you have Christmas, you know, the joys of fighting in December, as I found out the last 2 years, you get to enjoy Christmas. So there's always that. But yeah, so he might have put on a bit more weight than he would like to. So I understand it from his point of view, but from the board's point of view, talking about boxer welfare, it's got to work for both fighters, right? It can't just be, okay, you can't make that weight, so come in a lot heavier than your smaller opponent who's already coming up in weight. But then again, you can't really do it by a fight basis, because not every fighter is going to be coming up in weight, like Felix was, for example. So it's difficult to put like a specific rule on it, but I guess they're doing the best they can in that sense. But yeah, I mean, the welfare has got to be looked at as for both sides.
Yeah, of course.
Generally speaking, fighters do end up taking the fight anyway, even when it's you know, the only one I can think of in recent times where somebody just walked away from a really big fight was Lee Haskins against Randy Caballero, where they were supposed to box for a world title at bantamweight, and Caballero came in at 1-2-3, I think it was. So technically, you know, featherweight, and the Sanagars just said, no, we're not doing that. Which is a big call, isn't it? Because that was on a big show as well. It was in Las Vegas. It was on the undercard of a real big fight. I can't remember. It might have been a Ward Kovalev show or something. There was a big night anyway, and they decided, no, we're not doing that. But generally, I mean, one of the reasons why Team Inoue and Japanese boxing fans want to see Luis Neri in the ring with him is because he did that against Yamanaka. Yamanaka went ahead with the fight anyway, and it didn't end well.
No, it did not. Andy, you mentioned there about it taking the edge off the fight. I think you're probably right there. It seemed a little bit like the writing was on the wall from the very first bell. Well, from the time when they came together to get the referee's instructions, and Lewis Crocker was a light heavyweight boxing a guy who didn't really look like... I thought Felix looked fantastic on the scales, but the difference is he's not put any weight on after that. He'd probably been about 150 pounds, if that, when he went in the ring on the night, and it showed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. In that situation, though, if you're Crocker, the fact that you know it's coming probably helps, because mentally you can attune yourself to the fact that you maybe are not going to get the credit for the win that you would like due to the circumstances, but you've still got to go out there and make sure that you do a really good job. Otherwise, you do leave yourself open to more criticism, basically, because people always look at missing weight and they're not really bothered about the extenuating circumstances a lot of the time. It's just, this is your contractual obligation as a professional fighter. Your most basic requirement is that you make weight, and you haven't done it. And if you then turn in a subpar performance, then it's kind of open season, really, a lot of the time, fairly or unfairly. But he did what he was supposed to do, so you can't criticise him on that score.
Chris, we sat here last week ahead of the show, me, Andy and Barry, and kind of discussed the welterweight division and where Crocker really fits inside that. Admittedly, I don't think we can take an awful lot away from this past weekend against Jose Felix, natural 30, 35-ish pounder. But where do you think Crocker sits? How good is he? Obviously, a lot of hype around him, heavy-handed guy, looks commercially viable. How good do you think he is?
Yeah, I think it's still hard to tell because of the level he's boxed at. Fantastic finish the other night. Like, as soon as I saw that left hook land and the way he threw it, like someone on the move to be able to carry that power. I mean, he obviously moves into it, but the accuracy to find that as someone's moving quite quickly that direction. So puts his shots together really well. Obviously carries power. I think Shane took him on the pads years ago and said he can whack. But yeah, it's hard to tell, and I think at the moment you need that sort of domestic level opponents, a few more like that. Obviously you had Tyrone McKenna, but there's quite a few, not a bad little crop at in Brits at welterweight. I'm trying to think who would be best for him right now, but just to see, sort of gauge the level. But yeah, even your Echo Esserman and people like that would be interesting, because Echo pushes a lot of people. He's got good work rate, he's got some good wins. That sort of level would sort of tell more he's tough as well, Echo. So, but so far Crocker hasn't really put a foot wrong. He looks very demanding and sort of assured of himself in the ring. Like, just seems to walk people down. Looks very calm. Cool, calm and collected when he's in there. He's just sort of hands high, bit of head movement. And when he lets his hands go, it's a joy to watch, because he puts his shots together really well and all of them carry power.
Andy, we spoke last week about kind of Belfast looking in the post-Frampton, with respect to Conlon era, of that kind of headliner, that main attraction. This past weekend, I mean, considering everything that happened with the weight, and the fight ended up being sort of being a mismatch, call it for what it is. Was that an opportunity missed, do you think, for Crocker? Or do you think that it's sort of at the stage of his career, it doesn't really matter as long as they can kind of keep building shows there in general?
I don't think it really matters too much, because they are genuinely a knowledgeable crowd in Belfast. So they will be aware of the fact that he missed the weight. People won't watch the fight and not know, but they'll also be aware that these things can happen. So I don't think it'll do him any harm at all, to be honest. And he is the one who can pick up that flag and really plant it, because he's from the city. He's from the city, and there is a vacancy at the moment. And I just feel with Conlon Boxing as well, they really know what they're doing, and they're from there too. So working in conjunction with them, if you're a big promoter, makes all the sense in the world with those Belfast shows, because I think they moved the venue of that one, didn't they? Quite late on, or they obviously had a real good think about where should this go, in Belfast in January because they know. So I feel like I think it's set up for him, to be honest. I do think it's set up for him. But there's no need, like Chris said, there's no mad rush. There's no mad rush. Just building. You don't ever want anybody to stagnate. But maybe what they'll take away from this was that the turnaround maybe was a little bit too quick. But you keep that ball rolling, you keep that momentum building. And I definitely don't feel like he's lost any momentum due to what happened with the weight.
You'd think probably anyway. People would generally just see the knockout and go,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
amazing.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah.
So you said earlier, like if he goes the distance then and doesn't box well and like underperforms, then maybe people start talking a bit loudly about it. But
you can't have another one of them.
No.
Like, can't have too many of them back to back.
That's it.
People now he needs like that test. But what a venue, by the way. Mentioning the venue there, like that looks like such a cool venue.
I haven't been to watch boxing in Belfast in a long time.
I think
Never
Barry.
been to
I think even Shane might have boxed there as an amateur in the Ulster Hall. That's where it was. Wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a famous
just a
venue.
beautiful
I've
venue.
never watched boxing there.
It looks like an amazing venue, and I mean, I don't know how much it holds, but it's like a posh York Hall, for want of a better phrase. But amazing venue, and the crowd seems to hold the atmosphere as well. You know, I'm a sucker for atmosphere, so it looked like a decent atmosphere in there.
Before we move on and talk about some of the other fights on the card, let's stay with the welterweight division. Somebody else we were talking about recently, Paddy Donovan, of course, from Ireland, from Dublin, so not Belfast. 7th round stoppage win over Williams Herrera. Chris, going to come to you first. Had to work hard at times there, Paddy Donovan. Obviously, a lot of hype surrounding him going into the fight. And again, sort of who's going to take that mantle for Irish boxing here, there and everywhere. Didn't have everything his own way against Herrera, but got the job done in the end.
Yeah, he'd never been stopped, had he, Herrera? No. So a good win and a really good learning fight. I think Andy Lee mentioned that in the post-fight interview, and it's they're the fights you need at that stage. If he'd have wiped him out there in 2 rounds, you're just gaining nothing at this stage of his career. It's really important to have fights like that, go away with a bit of adversity, like Andy said, basically, and work on that. You know, I think a few body shots sort of slowed him down a little bit, made him a little bit less sharp. Was landing some really clean shots, but early on, but they weren't really having much of an effect. They weren't really like buzzing him up like it might have done of previous opponents. So as you go up the levels, people have got better chins. You've got to have that punch power to really trouble people, because the style that's going to trouble Paddy is a come forward fighter with a good chin who just keeps applying pressure. You know, someone like a Marcus Maidana style, like just walking him down, that's the style to beat him. If I had a fighter who could fight like that, you'd be chomping at the bit for a fight like that. So like a welterweight, like an Avanesian or someone like that is going to really trouble him. Obviously he's a bit below that level at the moment, and experience wise, but he's got a lot to learn in terms of, but a lot to take from that fight. So I think, you know, he can do it. I've seen him, obviously he was in the gym sparring Adam, and it was a joy to watch those spars, real technical spars. He's very good at what he does, but needs to add a few more facets to his game, and just learn how to deal with that pressure more. Probably needs that sort of sparring. I don't think he'd had a lot of sparring before he came to Adam. He said he can't get much sparring over there because he's sort of, is he based in Limerick?
Yeah, Dublin, Limerick. I know the gym's
around
in
that
Dublin,
area. So it's not a huge amount of sparring, is what he said. So a lot of time it's bags and pads, which is no good for someone at his stage of his career. He needs to go travelling spar, and he was, you know, happy to come over and spar with Adam. Adam got him over for the last camp, and that's the sort of sparring he needs. Although stylistically, Adam's not the style. He needs to be sparring. He needs to go and have those, you know, technical hard spars. You know, maybe with a light middleweight or something like that, or even a really strong welterweight, and get that experience in to get to that next level.
I was going to ask about the Adam Azim sparring. I was unfortunately not allowed to come watch that one. What was that like? Obviously, I understand there's certain bits and pieces that you can and can't discuss when it comes to sparring, but you mentioned there about kind of very technical sparring between them. It was obviously before Adam's last bout. Expand on that a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I mean, they're both counter punchers. Like, Paddy's naturally a lot heavier than Adam. He boxes at welterweight. He's a bit taller, stronger. You know, Adam's still building, still getting stronger. He's strong in his own right, but I think Paddy's just that little bit older. But really good sparring, but just hard to watch at times. Someone like me who sort of walks forward and likes to have a tear up when they're so technical and they're both standing off each other and they're both throwing jabs, pulling back, missing. So that but yeah, it was really good, and I think Adam learnt a lot from that. You learnt to have to put your shots together against some people like Paddy. You sort of have to get them you have to trigger them to counter you, and then almost counter the counter with you can't just go jab, miss, there's jab. It's not enough. You've got to sort of feint, make a miss, and then put 3-4 shots together. And Adam started doing that in that sparring. It was really good to watch, because it was over. I think it was across 2 weeks. It was in the build up to my last fight in December. I was in camp, so really good technical spar to watch. But like I said, those can be boring when you've got 2 counter punchers. One's a southpaw as well, so they don't always gel well. But really good learning for both of them, I think. And I think Adam needed that sort of sparring in terms of just for his own development. Stylistically, it wasn't the right one for Petr, but it was great learning from him.
One for the purists. Andy, going to come to you. Impressed with Paddy Donovan last weekend?
Yeah, I think it was a really good fight for him. I think it was kind of what he needed, because, as discussed, you have to go through those different levels, don't you? No matter how good you are or how good the people around you might think you are in terms of how quick you can go, there's no avoiding it, and there's nothing to be gained by trying to avoid it. And Andy Lee, any good trainer, they all know that. It's a bit like early stages of a career. It's like a series of exams, isn't it? I always feel like you learn the syllabus in the gym, and then you take the exam on the night. And whether you pass or not is up to your trainer. A win is not necessarily a pass. They'll decide whether you pass, and if you do, onto the next syllabus, onto the next exam. If you don't, then you go back over it and you resit. And you have to go through those different stages. You can't just go from your GCSEs up to PhD level, because what will happen is that you'll get asked questions that no one's taught you the answer to, and no matter how good you are, you'll then have a massive problem, and that can set you back a long way. And people will always point to someone like Lomachenko and say, well, he moved incredibly quick, and he did, but he had nearly 400 amateur fights, during which
you would have taken every single exam.
Yeah, all of those questions were asked. So it's and pro boxing is different. Like we all know that, but yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it step by step. You have to. And if you take that step and it turns out, wow, he handled that really easily when we thought he might have struggled. Good to know, isn't it? It's still worth doing, and then you get back out as quick as you can. But that's the way you do it. That's the way you build a fighter up.
What did you make of Paddy's performance himself? I mean, in the middle rounds, it looks as though, like as Chris mentioned there, like he felt a couple of the body shots. He got hit with a really good, clean right uppercut at one point as well, which I thought buzzed him. But again, all valuable boxes to tick when you're at the stage of your career as a Paddy Donovan, but didn't have everything his own way. Having said that, I thought the stoppage, we'll come on to the kind of the actual stoppage, but I thought the first body shot that I didn't think Herrera really ever recovered from, sort of Luke Campbell like bolo left hand uppercut to the solar plexus, was a beautiful shot. Yeah,
and he's got that variety, hasn't he? He's got that ability, that boxing IQ. Barry was talking about it last week, that when you have a conversation with him, you can tell that he's a clever fighter and that he sees things, and he's therefore got the ability, once you've seen them, even on the fly, to try and set something up. And think your way through it, basically. But it's good that he didn't have everything his own way, because you won't get everything your own way. And that first experience of getting buzzed, getting hurt, that's a rite of passage everybody has to go through. And I do feel like it's probably better if it happens sooner rather than later. If it has happened to him in his pro career before this point, I can't say that I've really noticed it. And it's not the same as it happening in the gym for all sorts of different reasons, because you don't really know how somebody will react when it happens to them for the first time. You can feel like you do know, but you don't actually, because it is this kind of weird thing. The way people have described it to me, so see if you agree with this, is it's never pain. No one's bothered about that, but it's like, it's like the space around your head goes numb. Somebody said to me, like, you've had too much to drink, and your spatial awareness just isn't really there, and you just have to kind of wait until that comes back, basically.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right, but I don't know if Paddy was in that much trouble.
I don't think he was.
He wasn't like badly, but he definitely felt that right.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you were buzzed as a pro, or do you remember thinking getting hit with small gloves and thinking, "Oh God, that's different"?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been badly hurt as a pro in terms of like I have to hold on here. Yeah, like I have like sometimes like right, okay, you got hit with that bit of a buzz, but you can't take the next shot. I mean, Barry always says that to us. Like, if you get hit with one shot, don't get hit with the next one or two or three shot. The rest of the combination, like that's a big thing that Barry says, because a lot of the time that is the shots that put you down, and then that turns the fight, because almost in a mindset, like it just gives the other fighter like a complete re-energize and etc. But I mean, you get buzzed and you think, okay, I can't get hit with the next one, or I can't get hit like that in the next 10, 20 seconds or whatever. So yeah, you sort of regroup. And sometimes it's not even, you might see a fighter look like they're regrouping, but might not be regrouping for their own head, but just to take the confidence away from the other fighter. Like, just don't let them land anything in the next 10 seconds. And that's the ring generalship, and having that know-how and the IQ to do that. Kind of happened in the Isaac fight. Actually, I got hit with a half decent shot in the second round, and then sort of like went for a little, like, I think we tried to trade a little bit more, and then I was like, right, I'm just going to take the confidence away from him, or not give him any more confidence by him landing a shot and me landing a shot at the same time, because it's that momentum in a sense. So go for a walk, regrouped, and then, I think I ended up winning the rest of the round after that point. So is that little bit of knowledge here and there, knowing what to do, and that's experience, and Paddy at times was tucking up, and then he was like when he was under fire, and then was like looking to land, and maybe just diffuse the situation. George did that really well, I thought, during his career. Adam Booth sort of used to teach that little lean back dip, smother, walk him across the ring, and he was really, you see a lot of Booth fighters do that, and Josh Kelly does it. Eubank did it as soon as he was under Adam for those couple of fights, or fight, whatever it was. It's that just little pull, dip, smother, completely diffuse the situation. And that's not necessarily because they're hurt, it's just because they might be backed up against the ropes. It just takes that edge away from the other fighter, and then you reset, you get in a clinch, and the other fighter sort of gets out of that mindset and out of that confidence of they've relaxed, and it switches them off. So knowing to do those sort of things is important. And Paddy will look at the last fight, and he kind of did it at times, but he also looked to fire back at times, and just diffuse that situation, especially when you're in his shoes and you have his skill set, who's not like one to rough it up and be tough on the inside. You just got to diffuse the situation, get back long, and do what you do best. Yeah,
fight management. Final fight to discuss from this past weekend comes in the cruiserweight division. Chris, going to come to you first because you do a bit of boxing in that division. Your ex-opponent, of course, two-time opponent, Tommy McCarthy.
Not as a pro.
Not as a pro, Chev Clarke, but somebody you've worked with in the gym since he's turned professional as well. Good performance from Chev Clarke. Really set about Tommy McCarthy and got the stoppage early on in the fourth round. What did you make of Chev Clarke's performance?
Yeah, I think it was a solid performance. I thought Tommy looked in really good shape physically, mentally. In a few interviews I saw, a few clips, he seemed like he was in a good place. As we know, he's a good talker anyway, so he might have just been fooling us all. But no, he seemed in a good place. But it was perfect for Chev. He knew what he had to do, set about him, take any confidence away that Tommy could get, because Tommy's just come back off the back of a stoppage loss to Sislak. Obviously, I stopped him a couple of years ago now. So it's just, once his confidence can't be that high, so you just take that away from the off. And Chev fights like that anyway. He always goes out the blocks really quick, puts his shots together really well. I think the ring was made for Crocker, and which suited Chev because it was like quite a small ring the other night. But Tommy did look a bit flat, sort of held his feet too much, didn't look to move too much. But Chev did well. He's got great variety, got a great right uppercut, and then drilled some good body shots home. And yeah, he just did what Chev does. And if he at the moment he sort of he could probably do with more rounds and learn, like we were just talking about fight management, just probably manages energy levels a little bit better, because if someone can take those shots and get into the later rounds, then sometimes he looks a little bit fatigued, not massively fatigued. He's still got his punch power there, Chev, but it's almost like just take a little bit off. I mean, against Tommy, maybe he just thought, I know I can go through this and get the result he did. Obviously, he's done the best job on Tommy that anyone's ever done. So, yeah, it was a good performance from Chev.
A lot of talk at the minute, kind of around domestic cruiserweight division. Obviously, Isaac Chamberlain's got the British. Potentially could box for the European against Sislak, who you've mentioned. Vidal Riley's kind of floating around in there. Where do you think Chev should be looking to go next? Because I watched the Sislak McCarthy fight, and I know it would be jumping levels kind of conventionally, but I didn't really see an awful lot that would make me think that Clarke would be massively outgunned against a Sislak. And I don't really know where the middle fight is, because I think it seems as though Chamberlain and Riley could happen, which kind of leaves, I mean, you're talking about going rounds. Where does he get those rounds if it's not going to be at British level?
Your old pal Vasil Dutsar.
He's boxed him.
Oh,
He's boxed him. He went 10 rounds in his last fight. So in his last 3 fights, David Jameson, Vasil Dutsar and Tommy McCarthy, inside 8 fights. That's good. That's pretty good going.
You're absolutely right there, Andy.
I thought about that opponent.
Yeah, that type of opponent. I think he could have done with a thing with Vasil Dutsar is he doesn't have enough of a work rate. He doesn't put enough shots in. He needs someone exactly like Dutsar, who's a little bit quicker and has a little bit more of an edge about him. Sislak is a step too far at the moment, at this stage, because he's fought for a world title. He's looking to get back on the world title scene. I think he's ranked top 5 of a few governing bodies. Really good fighter. Obviously, Lawrence beat him. I think Lawrence dropped him, didn't he? But then sort of become a bit of a stinker of a fight. But tough. Like, a lot of people get dropped by Lawrence, but he's obviously really tough. He's from that stock. And yeah, it's hard to find that. Someone like a Vidal Riley would be a great crossroads fight, similar to where me and Richard were in our careers. But, like you said, Riley looks like he might go try and get a Chamberlain fight. Yeah, it's hard to find an opponent, because you kind of want him in the domestic scene, because it just helps build that fun, those fun fights, and you build your name a bit better, which is why the Tommy McCarthy fight was so good. But you need someone who's tough enough to deal with those first 4 rounds, or able to go with him and land something significant. He hasn't really looked hurt. I think Dutsar might have not hurt him, but buzzed him a little bit in their fight, but he's too slow and too predictable. So yeah, it's difficult. I think Vidal Riley would be the perfect fight, but obviously I'm not either of their matchmakers, but I think that'd be a really good fight, and a good fight for the fans as well. Good for both of their careers. Too many people hold on to their own, or look to hold on to their own, but obviously as well the cross-promotional issues and stuff like that get in the way of a lot of things.
Yeah, that's the thing, because you're kind of thinking about all of those guys, and you sort of see like a lot of those names that you mentioned there: Chamberlain, Riley, and then there's like Ellis Zorros and Jordan Thompson fixing to move to heavyweight, and that you can sort of pick them all and you go, okay, that's not going to happen because of that, that's not going to happen because of that, and then you kind of run out of options a little bit, and it's difficult to see where to place him, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, it is, because if you feel like you're on the outside looking in a bit, then you want to try and go a different route, but you still need that kind of bridging fight. Mikhail Lawal, that would be another option for him. Yeah, I don't know if that's one that would really set pulses racing, but
no,
it wouldn't set pulses racing, but it's a good fight. Mikhail's tough. Like,
yeah, he'll stay in there and he'll carry the threat of the right hand.
But then is he going to let his hands go? Because obviously he didn't in the first 6 rounds against Isaac, and I believe that Chev's a bigger puncher than Isaac, but I think Isaac's harder to hit. That's a great fight. I mean, Chev against Isaac, I think, is a great fight.
He's mandatory for the British, isn't he, Chev? Or he's in.
Yeah, he is mandatory, but
It's not next, is it? It's
well,
not
I don't know.
to.
I don't know. It's
You don't
it's
concern
the cross promotional
Don't
issue. I
concern
think.
yourself with British titles anymore. Do you? just thinking about who's next for the WBO. So it is interesting. It's interesting to see where he goes. Were you impressed with him at the weekend, Andy?
Yeah, I was, because I think it was a really good fight for him. I think the matchmaking on that one was absolutely perfect, because you get a good name on your record. He's been a European champion. He's recently boxed for a European title, although it didn't go great. But those are great kind of points, aren't they? That you've scored, that you can add to your own total, basically. With McCarthy, it kind of feels a bit like he's got one foot in the sport and one foot out, and I wonder what he'll do now, because I know we're not really discussing that, but this is a very demanding, dangerous business, as he well knows, and it's not one you can really operate in if that's where you are. I feel like he's kind of moving on to another phase of his life, maybe, and if that's the case, then maybe that'll be it for him, because his pride won't allow him to take fights like the one he's just taken and lost, to continue to do that. But yeah, it was a good performance, and it was a good win. He's an interesting one, isn't he, Chef Clarke? Because I wouldn't say no one was talking about him after the Olympics, but people were talking about other people more. But you generally get someone who kind of doesn't attract as much limelight, but actually goes on to do better than other people. I mean, Lawrence was one. In Rio, he didn't go as far. He didn't medal, but then again, he was the first to win a world title.
Okay, right. Before we talk about John Ryder and Jaime Munguia,
Was he the only one to win a world title since that 2016?
Yeah,
out of the British squad.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody else yet. But yeah, before we move on, I just want a very quick touch on Giorgio Visioli with a back-to-back one-punch knockout. I was very impressed, Andy, with the way that he dispatched with Samuel Pikire, who's a game, tough fighter, and Visioli blew him out in the second round. A second one-punch knockout in as many fights as a pro. A lot to like about him. Yeah, there is, and that's always going to endear you to everybody, basically, including the promoter, fans, everyone. And I saw him a bit in the amateurs. I remember seeing him a couple of days in a row, I think, at the quarterfinals and semi-finals of the elites, because they were down at the University of East London. That'd be 2 or 3 years ago now, maybe, and people were talking about, that he was a name on people's lips. I actually saw him at the London finals last year as well. George was there too, actually, George Groves, and it's great kind of seeing these fighters come through, because you always wonder how they're going to do when they turn pro, but he seems to have really taken to it, and the way he executed that knockout was impressive, wasn't it? Just backed up, brought him onto the left hand. That was we talk about like showreel knockouts, but that definitely was one for a number of different reasons. And they picked up a few good amateurs in recent times, Matchroom. They've signed a few. They had another one on the undercard who I know a little bit because I used to see him down at Newham, Layli Buttigieg, and these are guys who people wouldn't necessarily know much about, and people are, I think, generally tending to go. It goes to cycles, doesn't it? After Rio, a lot of that Rio team stayed quite a long time, didn't they, on the amateur or on the GB setup. Some of them were kind of hanging on for an Olympics, and Tokyo, a few turned pro during that cycle, and COVID was a reason for that. But I think we're back in a place now where people are quite willing to roll that dice and just turn over pro sooner rather than later, rather than look at the Olympics. And because some of the uncertainty around that would have been part of the reason for it. But yeah, they've got a few who are kind of slipstreaming nicely, and he's one of them. Absolutely, very impressed. I thought the knockout on his debut was very impressive as well. But you don't really get them, do you? Like back-to-back one-hitter quitters, 2-0 with two very impressive
especially
stoppages.
Against obviously a half decent opponent, but early on it's a lot of time it's people get or journeymen for want of a better word get broken down, or fighters at that stage, the opponent gets broken down and finished. But he's just a great finisher for night. Great finish, sort of just made him fall short with that the right hand and just whips it straight over the top. But it wasn't like a step back punch. It was sort of almost the same
one
time,
motion, yeah.
But like it was a beautiful shot.
Lovely shot. Looking forward to seeing him return soon. Okay, head over stateside. Andy, going to come to you first. John Ryder against Jaime Munguia. I think everybody felt that it was a hard ask for Ryder, admittedly not necessarily in the same Beterbiev-Smith bracket, but somewhere in and around there, particularly on the back of that Canelo Alvarez shellacking he took last May. And it proved to be on the night, didn't it? Jaime Munguia pretty much dominant throughout, en route to a 9th round stoppage win. I
was really impressed with Munguia. Our rule here is always props to the winner, isn't it? Rather than looking too much at what the loser didn't do. And I wouldn't say, as we said, he was an underdog going into the fight, John, but I thought Munguia was really good. I think that's definitely the best performance I've seen from him. Yeah. And I just wonder what he might go on to do now, because I was never totally convinced by him prior to this, but I think that he's really found his weight for a start, although he doesn't really look kind of massive, but that doesn't really matter that much, does it? You fight where you feel like you're strongest. And he
had some problems, didn't he? Because he passed out at a weigh-in after making 160. I think obviously he's come up from 54 over the years, but
and hung on to those weights too long, probably.
Yeah, and he's now 28 now, so he'll be settled into.
Yeah, he looks good. He looks healthy. He looks, he look really, really good. And Ryder's a, he's a really good, sound boxer. And secondly, he's really tough because he's proven that over the years, but particularly against Canelo. So to do that to him was impressive. I did feel like John was going to probably make it through, even after those first couple of knockdowns. They were kind of flash knockdowns. Maybe not as kind of flash as he would want us to think they were, but he seemed okay, and in the middle rounds he had some success, and he did catch it with some really kind of nice short hooks on the inside in particular, but it never really deterred him, Munguia, did it? He was always just there, like right on you, and I love that. Me and Chris were talking about it before we started recording, and he'll be able to talk about it in a much more educated way than me, but I just love seeing that kind of approach where somebody is just putting you under pressure all the time, not necessarily throwing bundles of punches, but they're just on you, literally in your face all of the time. And then when the finish came, it was impressive, because you just get that one punch through that is just different to all the others and makes it and has that impact, and then there's no escape.
Chris, impressed with Jaime Munguia?
Yeah, like Andy was saying, like from the off, really, like he looked to really stamp his authority early on. I think it was after the first knockdown he jumped on him, which you don't really see too much at that level, like from someone who's obviously been established at other weights, but someone who's kind of finding their feet in a new division in a sense. But he went after him, and I love seeing that. And if I see it too much where people get knocked down, they try and be too calculated and they try and just jab and feint, and he just went after him knowing that what he was doing wasn't going to walk onto a shot and just put his shots together. And that's really good to see. But like Andy said, like that pressure, what he does, he just had John mentally engaged from the off. He just kept creeping that front foot forward, beautiful head checks, just moving his head, and then feinting and just taking the space. So the whole time John's just backing up without even realising it. I mean, obviously John will realise it, but without realising it, you're just watching one person just get pushed back to the ropes without any punches being thrown. And then he'd spring that double jab right hand, or he'd go lead right hand, which was a really impressive shot early on, especially. I think in the first round he landed one to the body as well, which sounded very weighty. I mean, obviously he got those rifle mics in the States, so it makes it sound better, but he landed one in the first, and I think maybe the third or fourth, which you could really like. Accuracy, the variety in his shots is superb. Can put his shots together really well. Like I said, like it'd be like double jab right hand, find that left hook to body, and that's kind of how the first knockdown came, was that double jab right hand, left hook to the body, and then he sort of flicked the jab out, and then John jabbed, and he just met him, just took his head off the line, met him with that right hand, and fantastic shot, good combination. But he has everything. He's got that educated pressure, he's got that toughness. John landed a few shots, he's got that sort of ring and fight management, because at times he'd be doing all his educated pressure, then he'd just go for a walk, and just sort of disengage. John might switch John off, or it might force John to take the space and be able to walk him onto shot. It did give John a bit of success in sort of rounds 6, 7 when he did that at times, but a really solid performance all round. Like, he ticked all the boxes, took a couple of shots. You don't want to take shots, but showed that John's a decent enough puncher. He's not a massive puncher, but he's solid in all his shots, and none of them looked like they bothered him. Managed the fight really well, good intensity. Like I said, that mental engagement that he does with the head checks, just taking that space with the feet, that's something Canelo does really well. And he does it superbly.
Andy, going into the fight and throughout the fight and immediately after the fight, all of the talk was about certain Canelo Alvarez. We sat here about a week ago, and kind of what you mentioned there about Munguia, really, for every Ryder performance, his last fight against Sergey Derevyanchenko was a tough fight. He was badly hurt a few times in that fight, could have gone either way, but the Munguia that we saw at the weekend was a more well-rounded kind of, he sort of managed to put it together against John Ryder at the weekend. Was it enough for him to warrant a Canelo Alvarez fight? Can we now picture that fight? Would you be interested in that fight?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it is. I mean, I would probably, the one I would really like to see is Canelo against Benavidez. I think we're all probably agreed on that. But given the way they set this up, it's the end of January, so it's long enough between this fight and the start of May, which is when Canelo will obviously box next, and they put him in with John Ryder, who's Canelo's most recent opponent, and there's that yardstick, which is what we've got in boxing. That's what we have. That's our metric, because it's not, for so many reasons, it's not like other sports. It's you haven't got times or distances to compare, like track or field or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So that's what you do. That's the game we're in, and the idea is that Munguia will do a better job. And then that tees the fight up, and that's exactly what he did. And you just feel like, given that, if he's not going to get it now, then is there a better time to kind of make that fight? I doubt it. And there's a lot to like about it.
Chris, Canelo Munguia, do anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I don't know if it depends whose view you're looking at from. If you a neutral fan, then yeah, great fight. If you're Team Munguia, I think probably needs a couple more. But then, if you're looking to beat Canelo, or Canelo get a little bit more over the hill or whatever, I'd still pick Canelo to win that fight, just because he's not as easy to hit as John. John's, he stands there in his head movement's not, he's not known for his head movement. He's got decent enough hand defenses, but when you've got variety against John, like Munguia has, like the right hook, long right hook that sort of came the beginning of the end, good left hook to the body, the straight right hand, like he's got a good lot of variety, Munguia. But yeah, I'd pick Canelo, but yeah, a good fight nonetheless. And like Andy said, I think Benavidez Canelo is unfortunately for Munguia, if you're trying to get that fight, is sort of one you fans want to see more. So when you're the second choice fight, and if that got made, you're going to get slated and not get the fight. But then you do a number on him, and then you sort of call the shots. But I'd pick Canelo to win that at the moment, but wouldn't count Munguia out, because he can move well, and I think you've sort of got to move well against Canelo, but also have a good judgment of distance, which Munguia had. He's not like one to just try and stick it on him, and I think that's the way to beat Canelo, just stick it on him and rip him up and stuff. I think Bivol showed that, sort of, if you've got good long levers and you can keep him at the end of shots and long arms like Munguia's got, then I think that would be the way to beat him, but decent enough punch power maybe to earn respect. But yeah, I think Canelo would end up getting to him very late. Whether he'd be able to finish him or not, I don't know, but he'd definitely be breaking him down, I think, through the fight. But a really, really intriguing fight.
Interesting kind of position, isn't it, Andy, for Canelo? We find ourselves talking about Canelo before and after every Benavidez fight, Munguia fight, Charlo fight. Is kind of the nature of the beast by being one of the big names in the sport. But he is in a kind of an interesting quandary at the minute, because I think now people are starting to look at Canelo as a fighter who isn't, the Canelo that ripped through super middleweight a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. And you've got Jamal Charlo, which is the name that's been kind of floated recently. Me personally, I'm not hugely interested in that. And then there's David Benavidez, which has been the one that seemingly everyone's wanted for the last year or so. Now you've got your Munguias, and kind of below that level with respect, you've got your kind of Belangas and David Morrells and people like that coming through. So it's kind of, it feels like boxing is always the way, isn't it? So the hunter becomes the hunted after a while, and Canelo seems to be, while obviously a great fighter and still the undisputed super middleweight champion, seems to be in that position at the minute where people are starting to look at him and think, actually, if I get you, then I'm going to be the new Canelo. It sort of feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. He's definitely got to that kind of tipping point, and it happens to everybody basically in the end, because he is the king at super middleweight, and it's almost, because he's undefeated at super middleweight, it's almost a case of looking at who can beat him. Although obviously he's lost a couple of fights, but not at that weight. So people are looking to see who might be the one to topple him, and then it's kind of like the passing of the torch and onto a new era. And that's the cycle of life in sport, isn't it? That's what people really enjoy. It was great seeing him clean out the division, and the way he did it as well, how quickly he did it. That set a great example and a bit of a precedent in recent times. So, if you're a massive name fighter and you call the shots like he does, you can box more than twice a year. And we're seeing that now with fighters, even at heavyweight, with the Saudi operation, that people are kind of maybe getting a bit more used to that. But at the time, that wasn't really happening, was it?
No.
I mean, it's not like I'm making it sound like it's back in the days
like.
of yore, but it wasn't. It was recent, but people just weren't doing it, and because of COVID too, that was another reason. But yeah, that is where he is now, and it must be kind of interesting as an athlete when you hit that point where 1 minute it will seem to you that you're the guy who everybody wants to see. How far can he go? What other peak can he scale? And then they're looking at you and just thinking, actually, I wouldn't mind somebody beating you now. It's a cold business.
See if he fancies the jump up to cruiserweight, Chris. I know he was thinking about it for a while.
I think we figured out that he doesn't want that. He don't want that smoke. But he boxed Mayweather over 10 years ago, and he'd had, I think he was 40 fights or 39 fights and one draw, I think, early on against Vasquez, I think. Miguel Vasquez.
No, he beat Vasquez.
No, but he boxed him twice. I think he drew.
He does have a draw.
Yeah.
He has a draw. I think it's Vasquez. I think he drew one.
Canelo box rack up. I should have this favourite all the time. He has.
And he's been doing this a really long time now.
Juarez.
Juarez.
He's had a lot of fights. And you always have to look at, how long have they been doing it, not how old are they, because that's not relevant. That's not the relevant stat.
But he had so I think he'd had 40 fights when he boxed Mayweather, and that was over 10 years ago. And I know he's been pro since he's 15. That's a long time. So you're going to be looking at him from an opponent point of view. Yes,
42-0-1.
That's it. I mean, I should know that.
You were there.
I was there. Basically, that's all the only reason I mentioned it, because I wanted everyone to know that I was there for the one. Right. My first and last time in Vegas, that was. Hopefully next time I'll be at a fight there, but in the ring. But yeah, it was. So that's like a long time ago. I mean, he's had so many fights, a lot of camps. He looks after himself, obviously. Gets plenty of vitamin D on the golf course, but.
It's a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah, that's it. You've been like the face of boxing.
I think now he's like, he probably doesn't really, not really care, but like he's been beat. There's always that edge that a fighter will lose at some point about, really, really, it might only be 1%, but sometimes that 1%'s enough, especially against someone like a Benavidez who's
top level,
a lot bigger, and it's just, how much can you dig as deep as you might need to in some fights? But yeah, you'd be looking at him now Benavidez, due to his style and his size and everything, would be wanting that fight massively. The heritage, where they're from, it'd be a huge fight for Mexico. So I think that would make sense the most from Benavidez' point of view. But yeah, it's like Andy said, interesting because everyone wanted to see him fight and wanting to see him beat this person, see him beat Bivol and this. And and all that chat.
Yeah,
and
that chat wasn't that long ago,
no,
was it?
it wasn't. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I reckon he might beat him. And then we get this whole new... I think what it is people they might not like changing their own lives, but they like it in everyone else's. They just want to see something different. They want to see a new name at the top and a bit of a Four Kings era coming where, Benavidez is fighting, beats Canelo, then fights this guy and that guy and, whatnot. But Canelo's been brilliant for the division. He's fought all the big names so far. Plant was a great win. And yeah, he's all his wins for super middleweight have been superb.
I wouldn't be surprised with Canelo, if when he does decide to call it a day, it's quite abrupt and a bit unexpected. It might be one of those situations where even one of those where a fight gets made and he goes back into camp and a couple of weeks in he just thinks, nah, it's just not there anymore. I think when it comes that decision, I think it maybe take us by surprise a bit. I don't think he's going to want to. Nobody wants to go out on a defeat, obviously, but I don't feel like he'll maybe want to roll that dice, knowing if he does know that he slipped a bit in that fraction of a second that Chris was talking about. And it is a fraction because, you all operate on a different time scale to the rest of us. You live a life of split seconds and fractions. And when they've gone, it might not be that obvious to us, but it'll be really obvious to you. And if he feels like that's the case, I wouldn't be surprised if he just thinks, nah, that'll do now.
But then at the same time, the Mexican, you look at Chavez, how many fights did he have? They just fight and they love it.
They take a break and then he come back.
And it's just...
That's true.
He might have a little break, but I don't think he'll ever... I think once he says he's retired... saying that, I don't know.
You never know. And it's always, when we talk about it here, I always liken it to being a great train robber and somebody comes back to you with one last job. You're never going to... It's the one we've always wanted.
Yeah, there's some big money on these trains at the minute.
Exactly. And that's... Yeah, there is. There certainly
he's never boxed in Saudi, has he?
No.
You've got to feel like if you're him, you'd think to yourself, I've got to be due one of those, haven't I?
It's interesting.
And they're going to want him because he's the only big name they haven't had. Well, in him and Javonta, and Tank, they're the two names that they're going to want.
Yeah, but there's not many.
Let's talk about Inoue boxing over there against Akhmadaliev as well. If he gets past Neri, which I expect him to. But we've spoke about it here in the past. Like I say, we kind of talk about Canelo so often now because there's so many fights that could potentially impact on his kind of path. But for me, at least, it's what motivates you now. You've won all of the accolades you could ever wish to win. You've made all the money that you could ever wish to earn. If it's that competitive side, which he says, no boxing, no life. I love boxing. I live for boxing. Then for me, and because Canelo has had one of those interesting careers, hasn't he? He's not revered like a Chavez, certainly not in Mexico. It's nowhere near what Chavez was. The kind of, and we know this.
I think it's hard in this era as well.
No, sure, but the I don't want to speak for all of the Mexicans, but having done Spanish content for Mexican audiences in the past, you get a lot of comments about people we've done stuff with Canelo around Mexican Independence Day and stuff. This guy's not a real Mexican. He uses it because it's marketing. It's this, it's that. People have always looked at the Gennady Golovkin fights. He should have boxed him. He aged him out, and people are always sort of, as it happens with every money fighter in the history of the sport. People used to say about Sugar Ray Robinson not boxing Charlie Burley. It's, you could have done this, you could have done that. If it at all matters to Canelo kind of what that public opinion is, which I'm sure it doesn't, but if it does, we've said this in the past, I want to see Canelo Benavidez when Canelo is 9-10 rounds in and Benavidez is 1-7 and 8 and 9 and he's getting stronger and stronger and Canelo's sitting there and thinking, right, then we'll see. And if he can do that and he can box David Benavidez, be in those trenches and come out and win and deserve to win or stop him late or something like that, then that you would think would be the perfect way to round out the career
it
for
would.
him.
To be honest with you, even if he lost, he would probably become more beloved than if he won because that's what people want to see a lot of the time. They want to see that vulnerability, but that willingness to just to fight on and give it everything you've got in the face of that decline. People really, really admire that. I definitely feel like he was too smart for it, but I've always felt like if Mayweather had taken that one challenge too far and had a kind of glorious defeat where he just showed all the grit and the spirit and the heart, and you knew that he'd only lost because he'd gone too far up in weight, but he was prepared to give us that, I think people would he would be more beloved than he is. I don't think Canelo's that guy. I don't think he's going to go there unless he... Yeah, I don't think he's really that bothered what people
I don't think he is
about
either.
him.
And I
don't think that many people really... I mean, is he really even in Spanish? Has he really gone deep with anyone interview-wise? I feel like he's one of these athletes who we don't really know.
He's a really good interview with a guy called Graham Bensinger. And if you've watched Graham Bensinger's work, he's like an American interviewer. He does really good work. So he'll interview like Shaquille O'Neal. He's done Manny Pacquiao. He's done lots of boxers, and he did Canelo, and he went round Canelo's house, and Canelo gave him like a tour of the house. Then they sat down. He starts talking about how his brother was kidnapped before the Rocky Fielding fight and all that stuff. How deep he goes into kind of his psychology from like, we're boxing nerds, we want to hammer down into this. What were you thinking when you boxed Josecito Lopez? Like, he wasn't really doing that, but that's a really good interview. It's a really good bit where obviously Graham Bensinger is kind of a sports interviewer. He's not boxing nerd like us. So he says, you boxed Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And obviously at the time that was a heavily hyped fight because of the name and stuff. He's like, what was it like to get a win over him? And obviously we know what Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was. And Canelo goes, man, SCC worked for me. It's really like at the time when he didn't really speak that much English. That's always a good interview to watch. But yeah, I don't necessarily think he's sitting around going, I really need to get the
love of the people.
Yeah, because I think he does have that. But I can't see money being really a driver for him, and I can't really see, achievement, yeah, sure. I would hope that either he or somebody said to him that you're not going to win a light heavyweight title, don't bother with that again, don't bother going to cruiserweight to get smashed to bits by Chris Billam-Smith, and you would feel like
outside of Bournemouth FC,
yeah, and you'd feel like
that'd be a fight week, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Canelo down in Bournemouth, but you'd feel like he's achieved everything that he would need to, both financially and from a sporting perspective. And the only thing that you could really see him driving him towards a Benavidez fight is that pride or kind of wanting to, but I don't really think he is that guy.
I think what it is he's in it for himself, and I think that's the most important thing for any boxer. I think you go chasing, like, the reason you do the sport, you fall in love with the sport and the nature of the sport as a kid, and I think you need to try and remember that. Which is hard when you're in it for a business purpose and you're fighting not just for yourself and not just because you want to challenge yourself. But I think he's at that stage where he doesn't care what anyone thinks, like Mayweather didn't. Like, I don't think Mayweather really cared that he wasn't loved. I think he just cares about how much money he was earning and probably and a few people, And he likes to be seen as that the guy, Mayweather, obviously.
Yeah,
like,
beat the house.
Yeah, like he likes to be the big dog, I think everyone has to call him champ around him and stuff like that. So, and I think Canelo's a bit like that in that sense, but I think he just does it because without boxing, like literally no boxing, no life in his words. So, and I get it because even after fights, I get that. I get into this lull of like, what am I doing? Like, I need to train, and this is 10 days after a fight. It's like, you feel like you're falling behind. You feel like you've got no purpose. Even though I've got a son there who's, giving me all that. It's just, when it's been everything, and it's a 24/7 job, it really is. Like, you're eating at a certain time, so you sleep better. And then if you wake up in the middle of the night, you're thinking about getting back to sleep, to wake up and then hydrate for your next, and it's 24/7. It's a constant thing. And that's what, even when you're out of camp, it's even more so mentally draining than it is anything else, than it is during camp, because you're focused on like, okay, what's next? And you need that routine, you need that drive. And I think that's what people don't realise that aren't fighters, is that's why fighters go on too long. We see it all the time. I mean, we know why fighters come back out of retirement or go on too long, because of that feeling. But it's not even necessarily the feeling of fight night and fight week. It's the everyday training. I think it's really important for fighters to have that. But I think for Canelo, he couldn't just do a run and play golf. I think he still needs that drive and that challenge. And I think that's that kid in him. And I think he knows that. He likes the challenge. I think he will fight Benavidez. Like, because if you're that much older, like, why would you fight Benavidez? Like, yes, he could still beat him, but does he need that fight for his legacy, for a pay packet, for love of fat? Not really, because everyone respects him. He'll still go down as a Hall of Famer. Like, there's none of that. So it's like, if he fights him, it's because he wants to fight him for a challenge, and I think he is that sort of fighter.
Yeah, ego plays a massive part in everything, doesn't it? For every single person in the world, but particularly elite level athletes, and it could cut both ways, can't it? Because it could get you to do things that maybe you shouldn't, but it could also get you to avoid things, because you might think to yourself, my ego won't take a defeat to this guy, and I'm wise enough now to, I'm not saying this is a case with him, but I'm wise enough now to know that there's a greater possibility than it used to be. I don't need the money. I'm not going to go there because I'll find it very hard to live with if it happens. Or it could go the other way, and it can make you, you can get dared into stuff, basically, can't you?
But then it drives you in camp. If he's got a lesser fight, someone who is expected to beat, he'll go in, he could have a flat performance. I mean, I use Kell Brook for this example, because when he didn't have the big fights, he didn't really look great in many of those fights. People, I mean, the Carson Jones fight, he probably thought, I'm beyond this. And then he goes, has a flat performance. And then it happened a few times in his career, but then for the big fights, he got up for even the Spence fight. He was still boxing quite well in that fight, especially early on, and still putting a good performance. But Spence is just a special fighter. But before that, he'd had some performances where you go, if you just went off the back of that performance and you put him in with Spence, and you go, Spencer's going to absolutely walk through him in terms of just wipe him out in 3 or 4 rounds. But sometimes you have to just get up for fights, and that's what I think is the situation with Canelo. I don't think he'll always do okay, like, because of how skilled he is. A 70% Canelo is still an extremely good fighter, but to get him up towards that 100% mark, I think you need a Benavidez and fighters like that.
Yeah, and it's also like you mentioned there about kind of the needing the routine and kind of having that. I mean, you don't get to a Canelo Mayweather level. I mean, Mayweather's still in the gym now, like, all the time, and you don't get to that level. Like, the higher you go, the more likely the person is to be, that way inclined. You don't reach that level without that next level obsession, right? Yeah. So that's always a thing to consider with Canelo. Right, before we move on and talk about this weekend, we've spoken largely about Jaime Munguia, of course, the winner this past weekend. Andy, can I come to you first? Do you think we see John Ryder in the ring again after the weekend?
It's difficult. It's difficult to know, because in a way it would be great to see him call it a day there, because you would hope from those fights against Canelo particularly, but also Munguia, he'd have made some really, really good money, some life-changing money. So that's a good argument for going out at the top of the sport. But the counter-argument to it is, just because you lose to those two, it doesn't mean you've got nothing left to offer. And that, I think, will probably prove more persuasive to him than the other argument I just tabled. So I feel like we probably will. At what level, that'll be interesting to see. It'll need to be something big for all the reasons that Chris has just been talking about. It'll need to be something that he can get up for. Not quite the same, but not totally dissimilar to Callum Smith.
I was about to say that, yeah.
It's got to be something he can really get up for.
I'd watch a rematch between those two.
I'll fight on the undercard again.
Yeah.
Do a light heavyweight, yeah.
But there are, if there's
the two names that scream out to me for John Ryder, and I don't massively like one of them, is Diego Pacheco, which I don't really like, and then there's Edgar Berlanga, which, if you're in the Ryder camp, you probably look at that and go,
could win that.
We could beat this guy.
Yeah.
He's got to beat Poddy McCrory, but
you got to look at John himself and like how much he's got. It's a training camp. It always comes down to how much is he willing to put in. He's got a family at home, and he is a professional, John. But then he didn't take a beating in the sense of like, God, I don't want to see him take any more shots the other night. But he took enough shots to think, I don't want to see him in another fight like that. Do you know what I mean?
Particularly off the back of the Canelo fight, which was, I think, people have rewritten that a little bit. That was a really hard night's work.
Yeah, and he got a lot of props, which he deserved, but almost for being too tough. And you don't want to see that in a fight, especially someone like John. Like, I know John, he's a great lad. Like, one of the real good guys in the sport, whose career everyone's loved watching, because he had a few downs at middleweight, the Nick Backwell loss and the Billy Joe Saunders fight, which could have gone either way, and then sort of reinvented himself and got up to that level. And I think he's earned. He would have earned decent money, I imagine, in Canelo and Munguia, but I don't want to see. But then, is he going to get up for, I don't know, someone coming through like the other guys you meant, like Berlanga? Like, how up for it is he going to get? I think maybe the Berlanga fight, yes, and then it's either 2 more fights if you win, as in Berlanga and someone else, or it's you lose and you're done. But it's hard, you got Morel, who I don't really like that fight for John, but that's the level you're going to be looking at. I don't think there's really anyone British that I'd want to see him with, in the sense of, don't think John's going to get up for any.
No, you couldn't
Brits.
See him boxing like Lerone Richards for a 10-rounder.
Well, no, I mean, no, absolutely not. And
the only thing he could do on that score would be just to think, well, I'll jump up to light heavyweight, because there's just so many fighters at light heavyweight. But he's not a light heavyweight, is he?
No.
He's
barely a super middle.
Barely a super middle, yeah. I mean, Munguia's not huge. He's come up from
54,
from light middle, and he towered over John, really, and looked bigger than John.
Yeah, interesting to see. But a good show this past weekend. As there is this weekend, Joshua Buatsi versus Dan Azeez. Finally there, guys. A couple of false starts, but we got there eventually. Andy, going to come to you first. Just realised that I'm going to be the only person who's going to be giving a prediction on this fight today, so that's great. Andy, going to come to you first. Really, really good fight. Are you excited? Because I am.
No, I am. I was when it was originally made. I think it was a fight that I think everybody likes, because there's nothing not to like about it. I think the delay might slightly help with the build up to it, with the promotion to it, because there does seem to be a bit of spice between these two now. All the chat around the original postponement, there was some mischievous suggestions from Edward Hearn of Maskell's Essex and others. But the tickets have gone well for that first fight, and there's no way that Dan Azeez is going to have pulled out for anything other than legitimate reasons. It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But the suggestion of it has kind of planted a bit of a seed with Buatsi, whether he actually thinks it or not, or whether he's just using it as kind of fuel to drive him, because it'll be incredibly frustrating for him. It doesn't really matter. But I think that this week, we're going to see some interesting stuff this week, I hope. Sky, we're doing a live Gloves Are Off on Thursday, which is the first time they've ever done it live. They've been doing it for, I think, 11 years, 40 episodes. This might be episode number 40.
2 quite trustworthy guys to do that with.
Yeah,
which I think is
but
good.
you just never know.
Live TV.
You never know.
They're doing it this Thursday.
They're doing it live.
They're doing
the
it this
day before
Thursday.
the weigh-in.
Yeah,
this Thursday.
Mate, what would you sorry to interrupt? What would you feel like if you were boxing and headlining like you do, headlining on Sky? Still feels weird, but anyway. How would you feel about doing that on Thursday? How would you feel about that on a Thursday? I'm glad it's happening, man. I couldn't afford to cover the rest of your career. But anyway, how would you feel on that Thursday? You make him wait. You got particularly for that fight as well. Like, say if it was Tommy McCarthy, there was a lot of intangibles around that fight. I know that certainly not as good natured as Buatsi and Azeez. How would you have felt if someone went, right, Chris, going to sit you down, going to speak to Tommy McCarthy live on Sky Sports? I mean, obviously, consummate professional as he is, he would have done it. But
yeah, no, but like, I think I'd say, yeah, because it's the same for both people for a start. It's the same for both boxers. So if you don't want to do it, they probably don't want to do it, or whatever. Yeah. But I don't think Jake would let me. I don't think, because that's Jake's job, is to manage me, and Jake McGuigan would probably say he's not doing that, or he's like, I don't really want you to do it, mate, but unless you really want to do it, they've come to me with this suggestion, I've got to ask you, blah, blah, blah. And if I went, oh yeah, I'll do it, mate, he's like, well, no, mate, I really don't want you to do it. Or he'd just ring me, go, they've asked me if you want to do this, I've told them absolutely not. Like, sometimes that happens with Jake, because that's the way he is. But it's the day before the weigh-in, like, you don't know where you're going to be at, like, to agree into it a week before the fight.
That's a good point.
Even if you agree to only a week before the fight, that's the best knowledge. You have to agree to it well in advance. I mean, they put this out, they're going to do it quite a while ago, didn't they?
A while ago.
So the boys are probably in camp, they're like, yeah, I'm flying, and they're like, and they get to like this week and they're going, why have I agreed to this? Like, I'm making weight, I've got a niggle or whatever it may be, and it's, if you're going to be making or getting most of the weight off probably that Thursday night, you're going to be you're not going to be in the best mood. So, and we've seen them get a little bit more heated, and then that's when they're fueled and they're in camp and whatever. And I think what Andy was saying earlier about them, it helping the build up, the delay. I think it's helped it because both of them have had enough of not being mates and having to be annoyed with the other person and trying to be angry and be the enemy of the other person. I think they're fed up of doing that, and I think they can't wait to get the fight over and done with. Obviously, they're both going to want to win the fight, but then afterwards they don't have to act like they don't like the other person anymore. And they would have they would have tricked themselves into actually disliking the other person for this period of time, or for the fight night at least. But you can see there's a bit of needle there. But I think that the reason for that is because one of them's just said something a little bit disrespectful, so the other person's gone a little bit more disrespectful, and it just grows and grows, and then all of a sudden you're like, I actually do hate him. And they, at the moment they feel like they probably do like dislike each other, but come Sunday they'll be fine. And I think on a Thursday, I don't know how I'd feel. I'd do it, but it's not ideal, and I don't see the point of it in terms like, because you might get nothing from it, you might get absolutely nothing from it. I think you're better off doing it a week before or the Monday of fight week. But I don't know if the Thursday they might just be so like, I don't care, because that's the kind of mood I'd probably be in. It probably wouldn't be worth it for them. They like come and do a massive interview with me or sit down like face to face and whatever. I'm weighing in tomorrow now. I'm going to fight him on Saturday, so I don't care. Like the build up's done by that point, really. Obviously you have a bit of a presser or whatever on a Thursday, Wednesday, and then the weigh-in. But the weigh-in, you don't like. I'm not interested in my opponent, as we kind of saw in the last weigh-in. For me, when you hit the weigh-in, it's fight time. I just don't think you'd get much out. It's like the interviews in the changing room pre-fight. I don't know why they do them.
Stop doing those.
Yeah, I mean, I've had words, and I don't think I'll do it as I get into the change room. But when they're gloved up or wrapped up, like, you're not getting anything out of me. So don't even. And I think Jake knew that, or Jake said it. We had the same thought without talking, and he's probably said to him,
I think any real kind of boxing person does, though, don't they?
Yeah, but like if you watch them, they're so boring. Like they're giving nothing to the viewer, and I think that is the fear for me of doing it on Thursday. Would be with that you're not going to get anything from the boys.
It's an experiment, definitely. I guess they'll have felt like this is one that they could experiment on because they trust these two, but at the same time it's kind of no good if nothing happens.
Yeah, and you never. And
it's too close to the fight for me.
Yeah, the point about the way. I mean, if you could do it, they both sat there in sweatsuits. Do it in a sauna. That'd be a good idea. I mean, allegedly, definitely not. But anyway, that's an interesting part of it, which I hadn't really thought.
With regard to the interviews prior to the fight, I think Sky kind of moving away from them.
Good.
It's more kind of arrivals, get them on the way in, and then just kind of dressing room footage to talk over, because I always feel like it's kind of
sacred
a bit
ground,
more illuminated. Yeah, exactly. And it's easy to turn to the person next to you, to Macklin, and just say, okay, so what's going through your mind at this point? And I know that sometimes, well, if you do what I'm doing, you can sometimes think to yourself, oh well, I kind of say that to him every time we do this, but not everybody watches every fight night, and that's kind of what hitting certain things is what people want to know, isn't it? What does it feel like? What are you thinking about when you're sitting there getting your hands wrapped?
When you commentate on so many different fighters, like me, for example, you've done a lot of my fights now. You'll get to know me, or we'll have conversations about it where you'll go, we've seen Chris in this situation before. He gets very zoned in, whatever it may be, or example for me is Fowler. He doesn't change. So everyone's different, but if you're commentating on a lot of fighters a lot of the time, you'll get to know each fighter, and you'll be able to talk about that. So it's not the same feeling for each fighter. Some people get into a completely different character, like I do. I'm very different out the ring and in the changing room, or the last 2 days for a fight. That's when I really switch. Some people come out of their shell more. They're more. They might want to talk to the camera. They might be a showboater, and they might want to be Ben Whittaker, for example. Might talk. Might be getting into that character, and it's essentially what a lot of fighters do. So I think the interviews don't do much for the viewer or the fighter. So I can't see a point in, and that's what would worry me definitely about a face-off on a Thursday.
Make sure you tune in. It's due to be a big one on Thursday on Sky Social. The final one on that. I've been in doing BTS and a few change rooms, your change room and a few others. And I've been there when the question's been asked. And not once has any trainer or manager gone, yeah, no worries, mate. It's always either been, fuck off, or... What are you doing, man?
Hurry up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get over and done with quickly. So hopefully the pennies dropped on that
The dressing room access thing is interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes
if you're not used to being in a dressing room, you don't know how to act in a dressing room. It's the only place that you can be. You have to know what it's like in there. It's basically get out of the fucking way, let the fighters and the trainers do everything, and keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, so I think as well with our coverage anyway, Latelo Mohammed does the backstage stuff, and he does know, and I think he would know better than anyone who's ever done that gig, basically, and because he's not a former professional boxer, so I guess there are kind of slight differences, but he would be painfully aware of kind of how awkward it is, which could be one of the reasons why it's kind of switched up a little bit. And if it is, then that's feedback you need to listen to, isn't it?
But then the interviewer has to come in with an energy.
Yeah.
And then that fighter's not on that energy. So you're on, rather than go into the fighter's energy, like, if you're going to do that interview, you know, going down to their level. If they come in all like bubbly and noisy, I'm ready to punch someone's head in.
And it's going to be yours, mate, if you don't get that microphone in your face.
And you're bouncing around and being all smiley and doing. I'm like, I don't care right now. Like, so it's not.
Right. So we want you to go into Derek Chisora's dressing room. Look, I'm out.
I
don't need the job. I don't need the job that much.
You don't even get to the second syllable of Derek, do you? Before you decide, now I'm passing on that.
Taking no chances, man. Definitely not. Who's the pressure on this fight, Andy? Joshua Buatsi or Dan Azeez?
I think the pressure's more on Buatsi. I think so, because I think he is in most people's eyes. I'd imagine if you looked at odds, he would be the bookmaker's favourite.
Big up bet for
because you know it's been a little bit of a slow burn for him at times, the career since the Olympics, where he made such a massive impact with the manner of victories, as much as the bronze medal. Really, you could argue. And
even in defeat.
We've always felt like he's the real thing, and I'm not going to necessarily change my mind now, because I've always felt like that too. But he really does need to deliver. The situation around world titles is tricky. I know Matchroom have always said that they had that fight for him against Bivol, and I've no reason to disbelieve that, but I don't know the ins and outs of that, and things can be complicated. But with 4 belts having been owned by 2 people for, quite a long time, opportunities have been limited. But he needs to really do the business.
I think it's a good time for him though, in terms of where the belts are at. Because you're still having these learning fights. He hasn't been overly active throughout his career.
True.
I don't mean this is a learning fight as Aziza, but I mean these fights, these statement fights, it's the perfect time for him. Like, he could have 2 fights and then the belts could be vacant, or he's mandatory for one of them against whoever. So I think obviously there's going to be mandatories called if they have that unification fight, which looks promising after that. So I imagine at least one of the belts will become vacant, and I imagine Josh will be right up there to challenge for it if he comes through Dan. And I think what Andy saying, like, we think he can be a superstar in the sense of like where he is at boxing ability wise, and I think I agree with that. And I think if he turns up and the best Buatsi turns up, and I wasn't going to give a prediction, but I think if the very best Buatsi turns up, I think he can beat Dan. And I love both guys. I've sparred both guys. I love them both. But doing my job for this show, I think. But we have seen Buatsi look flat at times, and if he does look flat, I know what Dan's like to spar, and you've seen his fights. He breaks people down, and it's not a nice place to be with that sort of pressure. He's got decent punch power. He's not like a one punch knockout artist, but every punch has got weight. He can be a one-punch knockout artist in the sense of like he can knock someone out with one punch, but it's just all of them are thuddy, and you feel them all. You can't give him any shots. So if Josh starts, taking a few shots on the gloves or letting a few through, then he's got a great chin, but they're going to take their toll. So that's why it's a 50-50 fight and it's a pick and fight. But I think if the best of both turn up, I think Josh just edges it. With
Buatsi, it kind of seems to be this sort of, I don't know, well-spoken, it's not rumour, but Monday's more always shit, people know. But it seems like everybody seems to think that Buatsi is not necessarily regressed, but hasn't kicked on in the last few years. That kind of tends to be the general feeling, that he could be further along than where he is now. On the flip side, Dan Azeez has strung together a good series of wins against sort of domestic-ish level, maybe fringe European level opponents. Where did this kind of notion of Buatsi not kicking on go from? It seems to me, and you'll be able to answer this as somebody who sparred him, I haven't really seen the pace in his work in recent times, and it seems as though like Dan Azeez has got that pressure kind of breaks you down, but it can be quite a similar pace throughout, whereas Buatsi, I think I remember a couple of rounds in the Bolotniks fight, he kind of that injection of pace, and then it took him a few rounds to recover after that. Same with Craig Richards, he had an injection of pace where he dominates a couple of rounds and then goes drifting. Where is this? Because I think if you'd have put this up 3 years ago, Joshua Buatsi versus Dan Azeez, people would, and Dan Azeez would fucking know this better than me anyway, would have said it was a mismatch 3-4 years ago. What changed? Where did it change?
I think it's just Buatsi hasn't had those breakout fights like in terms of performance. Like Craig Richards is a great win, but I think a lot of people, that was over. Like, no, I'm not being a Sky man, but I think it was over on DAZN and we didn't get as much buzz as it should have, because it was a great fight. Yeah. It was a great fight that they put on. In terms of the promotion, the boys both put on a great fight, and it deserved more props than it got, because DAZN was still earlier stages, of building the fan base. And obviously over here, everyone watches Sky. So you're a British fighter, Sky seems to have the monopoly of sport. So I think if that fight had been on Sky, I think more people would have backed Buatsi even more. But like you said, there's that injection of pace, which is a really good thing, but they almost both need a little bit of each other in this fight. Azeez needs a bit of Dan needs a bit of an injection of pace, and Josh needs a bit more consistency in his work and not have too much time off and just keep the focus and concentration. And that's what makes it such a good fight, because it's whoever can sort of use their strengths rather than exploit the other's weakness. I think it's more just do their strengths the best. But yeah, I think I've seen improvements in Josh when I've sparred him from since he moved over to the States. When I last sparred him, I thought his inside work had really improved. Very, very good on the inside. And Dan likes to get on the inside, but there's still that sort of lack of consistency in when we've watched him on TV. And I think that's the biggest thing with Buatsi, is you just need that his best work more consistent, and then I think you've got a superb fighter.
The version of him under kind of Virgil Hunter, I mean, people will go back to the Pavel Stepien fight to talk about it, definitely not to watch it, and talk about kind of Buatsi becoming more of a thinking fighter. And it's something that we see a lot with fighters with like real great natural credentials, as Buatsi did. I mean, as he came through the amateurs, you mentioned about the way that he was dealing with people in the amateurs. It wasn't necessarily the wins. He was knocking people out in the Olympics, got all the attention. And it seems like he's become more of a refined boxer, which, I mean, for the layman, could suggest that it's taken away from some of those natural credentials and abilities that he had. But do you think that's added to him in other areas? I mean, Virgil Hunter is more of a thinking man's fighter, but does he need to sort of blend the two between the thinking version and the kind of the raw natural ability?
Yeah, you can never lose what works for you. You can add to it, and that's probably what happened. He probably maybe that training camp went too far down the thinking route and really wanted to impress Virgil, rather than sometimes just sticking to what you know and putting your shots together more and being a little bit more, less thinking as such. You're still thinking, obviously, and there's still intelligence in putting your shots together. But yeah, you've got to merge the two. And he's got the ability to do that. He's got that nasty streak in him, Josh. That's the beauty of why people like watching him and watching his knockouts, he's got that. He's got real good punch power. You wouldn't look at him and go, oh, he's a massive puncher, like at his stature, but he can really, really whack. Great left hook, as he's shown throughout his whole amateur career and his pro career. But got power in all his shots as well. But it's just that sort of consistency again. And if he can merge that with the thinking, and then similar to Munguia the other night, he has that pressure. If he keeps that consistency in the pressure and then put your shots together, that's I think that's what he needs to focus on his style as such. But it definitely added to our areas from our spars. I've experienced it firsthand, and he's definitely smarter in a lot of areas, and still carries power.
Andy, not going to get a prediction out of you today, so I'm going to ask the closest thing to it. How does each one go about winning the fight? Chris just mentioned there about Azeez, that kind of relentlessness, that consistency that he has in there. Is he going to need to be, I'm assuming we're going to need to see a better Dan Azeez than we've ever seen in the past, or is that disrespectful to Azeez?
No, I feel like we are going to have to see a top performance from the pair of them, and that's what's really great about it, because the way that Azeez has just built through the levels has been tremendous. I remember when he got matched with Charlie Duffield. Southern Area title. I remember at the time I was thinking, wow, what a great fight, because they both trained down at the Peacock, different trainers, but they had to time their sessions so they didn't bump into each other, sold tickets to a lot of the same people. It's just a brilliant London Southern Area fight. And you wouldn't maybe have predicted what's happened with Dan since then, but he's just a great example of much like Chris did, and somebody like Josh Warrington did. It's just, okay, got this level, I can do this, on to the next one. Have a look around, I can do this, on to the next one. And that's how you do it. That really is how you do it. It's fine to have big ambitions when you turn pro and tell everybody that you're going to be a multiple weight world champion. That's great, but it's step by step is how you get there. And he's been very level-headed all the way through, but he is very ambitious. He doesn't feel like he's the B-side in this fight. He doesn't feel like, it's all right for me because if I lose, I can recover. He's not thinking that. He's not thinking that. He's thinking, I can beat Buatsi. I've sparred Buatsi. I know Buatsi. And the sparring they've done, Dan at the time probably would have been looking at Josh and just thinking, I really want to get to your level and fight you in the future. Whereas Josh probably wasn't looking at Dan in the same kind of light. So all of that for me just gives it great ingredients. And I think he's at that point, Buatsi, where he does really need a big performance. I've got high hopes for it as a spectacle, because I think with Buatsi, that instinct to just fight and want to finish people, that's what he's really about. And I think a trainer can just kind of look into a fighter and see it and then think, okay, I've got that, which is a great start. Now we need to try and build as much of the other stuff as we can. But I know that if we get to that spot where that's what needs to come out, that is what will come out, because that's the instinct. And I think they've both got that. Chris, just want
to bring you in. Obviously talking a lot about sparring each other and being very familiar with each other. You were, of course, very familiar with Lawrence Okoli.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Similar sort of thing at a time when you came into the gym and you talk.
Well, yeah, I had a bit more. I had more consistency at that stage of my career in regards to the fights I'd had, like McCarthy rematch, Chamberlain. Those sort of fights, similar to Dan in that respect of having those sort of tests and consistently building. And when I talk about the consistency with Buatsi in his fights, he needs that, but his career needs that now as well, or could have done with that in the build-up. And I think if he'd had the same consistency as Dan had with those sort of fights and performances, then I don't think anyone would be, not anyone, but few people would be giving Dan a chance because of the level that they've been at as amateurs, etc., and the hype behind Buatsi after the Olympics, etc. But that's what makes it intriguing, because it matters. Like Andy was saying, they're similar careers, me and Dan, in terms of going through the levels, and then similar in the sense where most people probably pick a Buatsi. 99% of the industry pick Lawrence to beat me, but and it's sometimes coming off the GBs where you've been number one in the country as an amateur, and then you go to the Olympics. Sometimes it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's not always the the perfect building way to build your career, because it's just the way, the hype, and sometimes it's better going the back road and staying quiet and gradually building up and learning your trade. And that's the most important thing for any career, is that consistency in building levels. You've seen it recently in my division, the cruiserweights, with Jordan Thompson and Ed Soro. They've just leaped up a level. Look, they've had to take those opportunities, and rightly so. And you know, if you offer most people those opportunities at that stage, they're not going to say no, especially if there's money that they've never even thought they might earn in their career on the line. So, but with Danny's, you know, built that way, and you've got to have that in your career, and it's so important. And I think, you know, that's what makes his fight so intriguing. But they've both got phenomenal chins. You know, I think that's the thing with Buatsi, which, knowing how good his chin is, annoys me when he doesn't just step on the gas, because it's like, you're gonna have to take shots sometimes, but you could look fantastic getting a fantastic, like Andy was saying, that killer instinct which you've seen him have. We just want to see more of it. I think as a fan, you just want to see more of it, knowing how good his chin is. Look, anyone could be knocked out, but there's a fine line of throwing caution to the wind, knowing that, okay, my chin's good enough to take this risk, or whatever it may be, and that's what makes fighters exciting, and people want to tune in, but then you get the highlight reel knockout to go with it. So it's I think that's what I'd want to see as a fan of Josh, and then with Dan, what you want to see as a fan of Dan is just that a little bit of injection of pace, just go through the gears a little bit earlier, because he gets up to that sort of third, fourth gear and stays there and keeps applying pressure, knowing that he's going to break people down. But this fight is going to be harder to do that in.
How much do you think each one will be paying attention to the spars? Because it's something that came up in your fight with Lawrence. I mean, Lawrence was talking about fighting by Respradis and doing this and doing that. And then he said in fight week, you know, when I turned up, I was, it's just Chris from the gym. It's just Chris. I remember him. I'm not obviously comparing Akoli and Buatsi kind of mentally, but from Dan Azeez's own kind of admission, really, those spars, particularly in the early stages, where Buatsi sort of moving him around and showing him this and showing him that, will that play into any even subconscious consideration going into the fight, or do you think that's something that they'll draw a line on?
I think subconsciously, if from Josh's point of view, if you're getting the upper hand, you can't not pay attention to it. But from Dan's point of view, and which is, I can only speak from my own experience, I'd improved tenfold. Like, I'd done a lot of work outside the gym, but also in the gym, and my sparring levels were, after sparring Lawrence, like, the performances in the gym were going through the roof. So I knew that I was much better, and I knew he'd underestimate me, because he might have thought I'd improved a little bit, but I knew how much I'd improved before getting in that ring, physically more than anything. Definitely, obviously boxing wise, but I'd got a lot stronger. I'd sort of changed up my training a bit and got a lot stronger, but also because of that, I was able to do the stuff Shane wanted me to do better, and get more success in the stuff that Shane was teaching me, because I was just a better athlete. So if I'm sure Dan feels that way, he's obviously done more work now under Buddy McGirt and stuff, and obviously I don't think he was with him for the whole camp.
No, so he's been doing a lot of work with Larry Akindayo, who he's worked with in the background, I think.
But then obviously, but he would have done a bit more training with Buddy since sort of they sparred Josh when beginning of last year, was it? They sparred. They said they sparred February or something, and so it's almost, it'll be a whole year pretty much since they sparred. So a lot can happen in that time, and I think that can be a big factor.
Okay, right, let's move on and touch on a few little points on the undercard. Chris, going to come straight back to you for your stablemate, Adam Azim, as he returns against Enoch Poulsen. Was privileged enough to come down to the gym a few weeks ago to see Adam Azim in action. Was looking very, very sharp. Expecting a big performance from him? Yeah,
I think the last few fights have been superb for Adam. I think, like I was saying, that consistency of...
Consistency builds success.
Hey, that's trademark. Watch yourself.
Sorry.
No, it's so important. It gets chucked about in business and everything nowadays, but it's because a reason for it. It's a cliche, but it's important. And you look at his fight against Reyes, where he sort of dropped him and sort of coasted to a win in the end, because he was just looking for that one shot again. Then the next fight, he started putting his shots together against Fanyan, but Fanyan was a lot better opponent. But a really you could see the improvement fight to fight, because if he boxed like he did against Reyes, that would have been an even harder fight against Fagnan. And then obviously I Petr Yan last time out, and you could see the improvements, the gradual improvements, and I'm just excited for Saturday, because I think you'll see it again. I've seen it in the gym, the improvements, and that's all you can ask for. He's so dedicated. He has a week off, and his work ethic's superb. You know, he might come in a bit heavy, which every fighter does, but he comes back in the gym and he's got another thing that he's doing, another extra bit of warm up or another bit of extras at the end of the session, what he's doing to improve himself. And that's all you can ask for from a fighter is work ethic and listen. And if they're showing the improvements in the gym and what Shane's teaching him, which he's doing, that's the thing when people talk about superstars and Adam being a potential superstar. There's no reason he can't get there because of the work ethic and the way he listens. So I'm excited for him this weekend. I think he put on a really, really good performance and get a knockout.
Andy, 2023 wasn't necessarily the year of the blowouts for Adam Azim. He went 10 rounds with Santos Reyes, 10 rounds with Aaron Fagnan, and stopped Petr Yan in the 10th of 12. But arguably a more exciting year than the year with the blowouts, because you know that, as Chris has said there, you've got that foundation and you've got that grounding in to become a championship fighter, doing 10 rounds twice against Santos Reyes and Aaron Fagnan, different sort of level of opposition, but the way he broke Petr Yan down showed a lot of maturity and something that really we'd wanted to see the year before. And it's great when he's blowing out Ryland Charlton and people of that ilk, but you really get to see, okay, this is what we've got when you start getting into those championship fights. And I think last year set us up for a pretty exciting 2024 for Adam Azim.
Yeah, I think some terrific spade work was done, because we've spoken a few times about how the McGuigans have got a really good track record of just matching people well. And I think this is just another pretty good case study in that, because he is an exciting fighter. He has got this terrific power. He's great to watch. And we saw plenty of that, with the stoppages. But then he needed to bed in and get some rounds, and they got him the rounds. They got the right opponents for him. And then Petr Yan comes along, and Petr Yan, it may well have been one of those cases where when the first bell went, he planned to be a bit more expansive and ambitious than he ended up being, but realised quickly that there wasn't really too much future in that. And he got broken down, and he was hanging in there and looked like he was doing okay until all of a sudden he just couldn't take it anymore. And the end came, and I found that impressive. Because it wasn't an easy job. It was a long job, and he would have realised quite quickly that it was likely to be a long job. And he just booked in and settled in for it and got the stoppage. I think Poulsen will be. I think Poulsen will plan to be more aggressive than Petr Yan was. Whether he ends up being or not, that's kind of down to his own mentality in many ways. He could go into his shell in the way that Petr Yan did, or he might not, in which case we could see something really, really interesting. He's not been very active, to say the least, Poulsen, and his last couple of fights have actually been at welterweight. So I'm quite looking forward to having a conversation with him during fight week and just trying to assess where he's at exactly. But this kind of bedding in process they're doing with Azim at the minute, if all goes well at the weekend before really looking to kick him on, is exactly the right thing to do.
And it seems
and the regularity's boxing with too as well, because when you're really trying to build someone like they are with him, and I think they're doing it successfully, because that fight in Wolverhampton, he was on second to last because Tyler Denny was on last, and the audience did peak for Azim, so that shows you that people are tuning in for him, and that's a big thing. That's a big deal. So they need to keep that being the case as much as they can. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, and it seems as though as well, Chris, that the higher the level that he goes, and the more, obviously we didn't necessarily see it from Frank Petr Yan, but the more people give him, I think that people look at the early knockouts and think that he's a destroyer and he's a this and that. Obviously he can punch, got lots of speed, but he's a counter puncher, isn't he, Adam?
Absolutely, and that's the issue but the beauty of the Reyes fight and the Petr Yan fight, because they both had, once Reyes got dropped, he was on the back foot the whole fight and just running sort of thing. And Adam learnt from those two fights, because Petr Yan ended up doing exactly the same thing, but one he was able to break down and the other one he wasn't. And that's the beauty. Like, that's from a manager's and trainer's point of view. that's what you want to see. From my point of view as a gym mate, knowing what I'm looking for is that's what I want to see, and is that adaptiveness in fights, and being able to adapt is one of the biggest things. If you do it mid-fight, it's amazing. And Adam's shown that, because he was sort of earlier on in the Pettersson fight, he was sort of looking for one big shot because he knows he can hurt people one big shot. But then he started putting them together and started breaking them down. Probably could have done it earlier. So that's what you'd be looking for if that sort of fight comes around again. If Poulsen goes on his bite this weekend, you'll be looking for him to apply more pressure earlier and just put his shots together. But yeah, it's what you, from like I said, from my point of view, what I want to see is that adaptation of from fight to fight and learning, and that's what he's done. And yeah, it's exciting to watch from my point of view as well.
Andy, we always speak about, well, we were speaking about the lightweight division for a long time now. They all outgrew it, and now we've been talking about 140 for the last year or so, which of course does include Adam Azim. Kind of one of the things that I've said in the past, and I do really like it, is that like over here we like our fighters to say, well, you know, just, I'll go back to the drawing board, I'll speak to the team, and just get off the fucking TV. Stop. Like, I don't pay attention to MMA at all, but like there was a great quote from one of the MMA fellas when he said that the next fight starts in the post-fight press conference. And Adam, while not being Conor McGregor, has always been very, you know, I want to fight the best in the world. I want to fight George Kambosos, was the name he was like fixated with for like 6 months. Teofimo Lopez, back and forth with Keyshawn Davis. I like that.
Yeah,
but of course,
I'm
it's also
a big
blending the, you know, having a team that do have a good track record of bringing you through at the right time and finding a nice happy medium.
Yeah, exactly. You want your fighter to throw names around, but you need the people who are guiding him to be sensible and actually know what to do. So they'll just think to themselves, you go out there and say whatever you want. That's the more the better. But we're not going to get carried away or kind of seduced by it and get ahead of ourselves. We know what the plan is. But you make as much noise as you want, because it really, you know, it matters. And when you box regularly like he has been, he's either fighting or he's making an announcement about who he's fighting next. And that's a really good slipstream to be on. So he has a fight, and then he's back in Sky Studios 2 weeks later announcing who he's fighting next, and they'll get him on the podcast and they'll do this and they'll do that.
But that doesn't make so many headlines, does it? As a fight falling through, or that's the issue with the sport, unfortunately, and that side of things. Like, you look at it, he's ticking all the boxes, but it's almost like fans or whoever, whatever it may be, don't like that. They want him to miss a box, so then they can have a go at him about that, which then ends up building your name.
That's
even
a good
better.
point.
It's like Mayweather, Pacquiao, like got spoke about so much and done amazing business, but it was like 5 years in the making. Like, whereas Adam's just like, yeah, that's next. You're in the studio, you do like, it's almost he's doing everything right, and he should get props for that, basically, you know, in terms of his career, how regularly he's fighting, from the team side of things, he's back in the gym, willing to learn, like he's doing everything right, and people are like, oh, okay, well, I'll just wait for the big fight. In a way, obviously, they are watching.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, what you kind of need really is you would need kind of like Dalton Smith or Harlem Eubank, or
just
both,
about to say,
just to be a pair of rascals, or at least one of them. Basically, they're all just slagging each other off all the time.
You need that domestic dance part.
Yeah. But they're not. They're all really good.
Really
but
nice lads as well.
None of them are that bloke, are they? That's
yeah, they're all good lads.
When you consider, I mean, Dalton Smith's boxing Jose Pedraza,
which
we'll come on and talk about, which is that is a sizable step up from certainly the level that Dalton's been boxing at, and with respect to Enoch Poulsen and those guys, I think Jose Zepeda is a level above that. Do you think that makes, because that's a fight that we've all kind of spoken about on various different levels of kind of seriousness, I suppose, over the last year, and it's Adam Azim and Dalton Smith.
But Smith's fighting Zepeda, right?
Yeah, so he's fighting Jose
Pedraza.
Did I say Jose Pedraza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Zepeda, Pedraza.
I let it go.
They boxed each other once, and I've never been able to decipher which one's which since. Anyways, boxing Jose Zepeda. Anyway, do you think that the Adam Azim Dalton Smith fight, does that make it kind of a closer fight to happen? The fact that Dalton Smith is now, like, you beat Jose Zepeda, that makes you, in my mind anyway, very least fringe world level, very least, like, if not world level, that's a world level win.
It's a major move, that, isn't it?
It really is.
It's a big flex to put him in with an opponent like that, because if you get the win, and it's one of those ones where kind of however it comes, it wouldn't really matter.
No.
A win is a win at that level. You plant that flag, and then you're thinking, well, I'm ahead of you, mate. So, in that sense, why would he then fight Adam Azim? Why would he? It would be kind of like Dalton Smith giving him the fight. But then, Team Azim would think, yeah, but more people know who I am. I box in front of bigger audiences, so I bring that to the table. It just it just gets that fight in the oven that little bit more, I suppose. And then you never know what might happen with future deals, promotionally, all that kind of stuff. You always like to feel like it doesn't rule out a fight, but fights between boxer fighters and matchroom fighters with Sky and DAZN at the minute,
it's not looking good, bro.
They're not. It's not, is it? Let's be real. It's not looking good.
No. But yeah, very interesting move for Dalton Smith, and I think Adam Azim gets past Enoch Poulsen. That's obviously a good win at that European level. Harlem Eubank's a name that's been kind of banded around for those as well. But yeah, I think you make a good point there. It's sort of, you're missing, I mean, Adam's not necessarily that type of guy anyway, but you're missing that kind of, even like Groves and DeGale like had it, Frampton and Quigg had it, like Josh Taylor and Ahara Davis had it. Like you have that kind of domestic dance partner.
That's it. You think about dream scenarios. Groves DeGale was just like manna from heaven.
Still hoping that they do it again.
Old amateur rivals.
I don't think they need too much convincing. I need a fair bit of dough.
I've heard that that James DeGale might be returning to the scene in one form or another before too long.
Oh really?
Yeah. Because he's kind of disappeared, didn't he?
He did. He properly retired.
Yeah.
Properly retired.
He disappeared. He did what Bellew said he was going to do. But yeah, it was. I think for Adam, he, like you said, that those Dalton Smith, those Eubank, they're still. I don't think Dalton Smith fight is going to happen until they're at the top.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, but for either team, I don't. If you're managing them, on the flip side, I'm saying don't worry about your own, but that's a really good fight to build, and I don't know if either fighter would. I don't know. It's a tough one management wise because they're both so exciting. It's like you don't want to when you're building it and you need to build your name a bit. And you're not headlining shows, then you have those 50-50 fights earlier on.
So like yourself and Richard.
Yeah. But like none of us were known. He'd had one major fight or bigger fight with Sam Hyde, which he was getting beaten, pulled out a great shot. But I boxed on Matchroom once at 5 o'clock or something, and a few Channel 5 shows, but against no 50-50 fights as such. So we both needed to build our name in that sense, whereas they're both headlining shows. So it's like, why do you do it when you don't need to? But and it wouldn't get as many props as it would deserve in terms. They both box each other now. Next, say these two, or they both come through their next fights. They wouldn't get the sort of big hurrah that they deserve in
or the pay that they would.
Yeah, or the pay that anything. Like I don't see the point in it from a for anyone's sake apart from boxing fans what get to watch a good fight.
How far do you think Adam is from world level challenging for a world title?
So like a fringe world level, like a Kambosos?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Down at lightweight, but yeah. So a world level guy.
Yeah. It's hard because 140 is such a stacked division at the top, and they're very, very good. There's a lot of very, very good names at the top. And I think like with Adam, it's just a matter of a couple of fights and seeing what happens in those couple of fights and knowing what's happening in the gym and seeing how he is in the gym, and then really knowing. But he's not far off it. He's not far off it at all. And he had 10 fights now. So it's to be 11 this weekend, comes through that, good performance, then that's still very early to be having those talking about fringe world level, but that's the sort of name he is. It was he's most people. I mean, people do it early now, but it's the superstars that start hitting it before 15 fights start hitting. Pre-world, fringe world level pre-15 fights. So it's he'd definitely be there by his 15th fight. I think. I think probably before that, providing the performances happen on the night and he stays injury free and all that stuff.
sort of like around that sweet spot for your gym, really, like Taylor, Coley, even yourself, like not too far away from that sort
10
of,
to, 12 to
12 to 16,
20,
17 sort of fights.
18 fights, so
okay, right.
Were you talking to Shane about this the other week? Was it you when he said he feels like he could beat Ismael Barroso now?
Yeah, I did interview
but
him.
Subriel Matias, Teofimo Lopez, Haney, Prograis, not yet.
Yeah, and that's it.
That makes total sense.
And
doesn't it?
we speak about it on here all the time. It's not just getting there; it's staying there. Once you're there, I think that's you got the bullseye on your back.
Yeah, once you somebody described it to me once as once you get pushed up through that bottleneck, there's no coming back down through it. And that's why I've always been so impressed with what Joshua managed to do, because he got pushed up through that bottleneck early doors, and then he's there then with that massive spotlight, learning on the job, and that's tough. And in that division as well, those names I've just thrown out there. I mean, Haney was amazing against Prograis, but Prograis still really good. Yeah. Matias, what a terrific fighter.
Teofimo
Lopez were two of the biggest. He's
Matias has got a belt though, right?
Yeah.
That's the only thing which is good about that, because someone's going to have to fight him. Like if they want to. Will they want to clean up the division and have to fight him?
But even then, like we're talking about,
a massive name. He needs a name.
The division's so deep, like even underneath them, like Richardson, Hitchens. I think he's going to be really hard to beat. That style is so hard to beat. If you, like it may not be for everybody.
Did he fight?
He beat Zepeda.
You mentioned Keyshawn Davis earlier on, and that with the Top Rank connection and Sky and all the rest of it. I mean, that'd be amazing. But again, for all the reasons you just outlined, like, why would you do that now?
No, neither side of the fence are really going to look to do that. Keyshawn Davis got to fight Andy Cruz anyway.
Exactly.
Got to go see Andy Cruz before you fight Adam Azim. Okay, moving on to the other hot prospect out of McGuigan's gym. I'm going to come to you first, Andy, for the return of Sweet Caroline Dubois against Miranda Reyes. Caroline now 8-0, kind of in the shake-up, the IBF title looming large in the distance, but obviously has to get past Miranda Reyes this weekend, but is developing into a pretty watchable talent, Miss Dubois.
Yeah, she's with the depth not being the same in female pro boxing as it is in the men's. That'll change over time. She's there already, basically, isn't she? She's at that world title level, and obviously her and Rhiannon Dixon got put together, didn't they? But she's gone a different route. But now Beatrice Ferreira is the latest one, who's a really good amateur. It's just a question of when it happens, really, not if. And you don't expect this weekend to provide any kind of stumbling block for her, and you want to. The only danger with someone like her is that she might get a bit too frustrated and possibly stagnate. But I don't really see that being. I don't really see that being an issue either, because she's got big backing. A lot of people very excited about her, literally invested in her, and she's kind of on the simmer and giving us more and more each time, in terms of the fact that she's really good to watch, but also she's just got a lot more to say now, and that matters. And I feel like that's probably always been there, but for one reason or another, she was maybe a little bit reluctant to speak up too much. And that's quite normal for people who come out of the GB setup often, because that's a team thing and you're representing the badge. And we talked about this before, haven't we, where you don't want to rock the boat, and it is a team thing. It's not all about me, but then you turn pro and it is all about you, and it's fine to try and make it all about you, because that's where your marketability comes from. So yeah, she's right on the cusp. It's just a matter of how it happens, really.
Chris, you see her every day in the gym, or every day-ish in the gym. How good is she?
I was speaking to Andy about her. She's the next face of the sport. Like, we're in a bit of a golden era of female boxing. It's really growing, and she will be, give it 30, 40 years when they talk about this era, she'll be the name. She'll be, Katie Taylor, Caroline Dubois. That's what it will be. Clarissa Shields. They'll be the three names. She's phenomenal, superstar. She's got everything. I've never seen a female fighter be able to punch like her. Like, she punches so hard. But she's got the speed with it. She's got the footwork. She's got the head movement. She sees everything. She's got the work ethic. She lives the life. And then from a marketability point of view, she's really coming into her own. And she's such a joy. It's such a joy to see her confidence grow, because it's grown basically parallel both inside and outside the ring, and it's just amazing to watch. And such a lovely girl, and I think the whole country will just fall in love with her over the next few years, and rightly so, in terms of watching her fight, but also her personality as well. Great character to have around the gym. Really good work ethic. You know, we'll go out and look for another way to improve, like I said with Adam earlier, and she's the only issue I or sort of reservation I would have about her is not having good enough sparring to get her up for it. And I've kind of seen it in the gym sometimes. Sparring partners come in and she's sparred before, and she's like, okay, and then she just messes around, moves her head, lands a few shots, hurts the person, moves around again, only throws to the body or whatever it may be, which can then, you know, cause that stagnation.
Ingrained bad habits.
Yeah, bad habits, and that's the only the fear. But I think obviously Shane and Pritchard and Jake will make sure she gets the right sparring in, and I can't see anyone getting near her. I just can't see it. I mean, she might have a few tough fights here and there, but I don't think they'll be that tough. I don't think you're going to be seeing her in any Poulsen Taylor type fights where they're raising. I just think she's too good at the moment. I haven't seen anyone really trouble her. She's just I'm so excited, and the reason she's not going to stagnate in terms of her career, she comes back in the gym, she stays fit, just like Adam, like them two. I mean, the whole gym now, like, no one drinks. Like, everyone calls us a boring gym, but they all watch us on TV, so it can't be that boring. Everyone spends their Saturday nights drinking, watching them on TV. So, it's the professionalism in the gym is at an all-time high, I think, and it just all breeds each other. Adam comes back in looking to improve. Caroline's doing the same. Ellie's doing the same. You know, hasn't had that chance to be as consistent as she would have liked, but she's still in the gym training and improving. And it's a joy to be around. But I just think Caroline, I just can't see anyone troubling her. I really can't. And she's the next face of the sport.
Andy, could dance partners be a problem for Caroline Dubois? Obviously, kind of that Katie Taylor. It's just my opinion. I don't ever envision that fight happening. Caroline Dubois versus Katie Taylor. Personally, you've got kind of your whatever's going on with Alicia Baumgartner. She cleared herself. Big up Alicia Baumgartner. Anyway, so she's around. Obviously, Michaela Myers welterweight, but I'm sure like coming down to lightweight or 140 in the future wouldn't be a problem. But it seems like those kind of Maya, Jonas, Taylor, that kind of cluster, as it were, who have really been instrumental in pushing the female code in the last 6 or 7 years, may not be there for Caroline Dubois, or do you think that they could be at some point?
Yeah, that is the difficulty, because as we were saying, because the depth isn't quite there, that could be an issue. I agree. If I'm in a Katie Taylor business, if I'm Brian Peters, that's not a fight I'm seriously entertaining, because what's in it for you? Nothing really. It would be on it'd be a big event and all the rest of it, but that's not, that's not going to happen. Let's be honest. And again, it is that she's high risk, decent reward, but not decent enough at the minute, probably. Michaela Mayer, I think she looks pretty settled where she is, to be honest with you. I don't know if she could come back down, or she would feel like she wanted to at this stage, or whether there would be enough time left in her career for Caroline to kind of move up. I would say probably not. But what we do have is we've got another Olympics coming later this year. We'll have another load of fighters to professional, and obviously they would have some serious catching up to do. But stars emerge, things you're not expecting to happen in boxing. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We don't want to be talking too much about how it's going to be difficult for her to become this out-and-out Hall of Famer in the next 2 or 3 years, because there aren't enough people out there for her to beat. Let's just wait and see what happens first. I do share the optimism, definitely. I really do. But at the same time, there's plenty that needs to be done yet.
Absolutely.
I think she will go through the weights. She will.
She's bound to, isn't she?
She's comfortable enough at making the weight at the moment, but I feel like you can go through the weights a little bit easier sometimes in female boxing, as we've seen with Clarissa Shields and Jonas and those so. I think she can, but I think she'll want to do it stage by stage, as in 135, 140, 147, 154, not go 135, 140, 154, whatever, and then jump back down and stuff like that. So unless the opportunities are only there, then she might have to do it. But she needs a Maya fight, one of those.
But she might be able to tempt Amanda Serrano. Because Serrano, if you think about it, at featherweight, there's not really that much around
huge
there
fight.
for her.
That's a huge fight.
She's already been undisputed. Yeah, of course, but she might do it.
Yeah, she's boxed there.
She might.
Shout out Jake Paul, get it done.
There we go. Yeah.
She's boxed to 7 weights, hasn't she, Serrano? So it's not like she's afraid to step up.
For him, sorry, on the
step up in weight. She's done it. So you wouldn't. She's after the biggest fight she could possibly get, Serrano, and I think it's one that they would take under consideration.
Yeah, once she gets a belt, Caroline gets a belt, then I think that's when the ball starts rolling.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm sure it's the talks are either happening or not. But the Beatrice Ferreira fight, I'd watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd really watch that. That's
absolutely
a real good fight. Beatrice Ferreira can fight.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Really fight. That's a good one if it happens. I don't think it will, but it'll be a good one if it happens.
But what route do you think they'll go then?
I don't know. I was in the gym a couple of weeks ago. Spoke to Jake McGuigan, of course, part of the management team. He told me to mind my business, pretty much. Pretty much. This is what's going on, Caroline. He went, yeah, don't you worry about that, mate. But anyway, no, I don't really know. And I think she's not going to be short of offers. This isn't some high. You mentioned that she's not high risk, low reward. As far as kind of visibility goes in female boxing. She's doing all right in that regard.
And you think if someone's getting paid as an opponent, that Sky pushing Caroline so they get paid well.
Well, there's the desire for the all-female card, isn't there? So if you can do the all-female card and you have to overpay to get somebody with the name recognition or somebody that she could.
Estelle Marcelli.
Yeah.
I just don't think she'd do it, Marcelli. I just don't.
She's
think
got
she'd
plenty
do it.
of dough, hasn't she? She'll be all right. She doesn't need. You would think again. It's not quite high risk, low reward, but it's what you said there was quite high risk, not quite enough reward.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's quite a good one. Okay, right, we have reached the end of our show today. I was going to say we're going to go around and do predictions, but there's only one of us going to give one, so we'll go to Andy first and tell us what we're going to see this Saturday, Andy, between Joshua Buatsi and Dan Azeez.
We're going to see a fight for the ages,
we're not going to see
and if you don't tune in and watch it, you're going to miss out. So you need to make sure you do. But no, I know I've got high hopes for this weekend. I always do. I'm optimistic about every single fight that I cover because, why not? This is a magnificent sport to be a part of, to cover. I love every second of it. And the one thing I cannot stand is people just writing off fights before they've even happened. It's a ridiculous thing to do. And ultimately often will end up making you look like a dickhead. And I never mind looking like a dickhead, getting a prediction wrong, which is just as well. But no, I think we're in for a good night on Saturday. I think we're in for a good night.
The only one who picked me to beat Lawrence today.
Yes, he was.
So shout out Andy Clarke.
He was.
There we go.
It's always Andy Clarke's always his one rule is don't be a dickhead, which I think is
no dickheads.
Quite a good motto to live by.
If you're trying to build some kind of podcast culture, which we like to do in here,
don't
our
be
rule
a
is our rule is no dickheads.
Put the hashtag down.
Yeah, hashtag don't be a dickhead. There we go. Coming soon. Chris, can I get a prediction from you? Or are you just going to give me the breakdown?
I don't know. To be honest, I do feel like Buatsi's going to turn up. I really do. I feel like he's got a bit between his teeth where he may not have had in steppy end fights and sort of fights he's been expected to blow him out there. I think the needle will help him. So I'm expecting a really good performance from both and a really good fight. And I think if what I think is Buatsi's going to turn up, I think he'll edge the fight. Yeah, I think, shout out Dan Azeez, man. I love that lad. I love them both. They've both been a joy, but not a joy to spar over the years. Dan always brings it, and may the best man win.
It was a better prediction than Andy gave. I never thought I'd say this. I missed Barry this week. But there we go. I'm going to go for Joshua Buatsi. I agree with you, Chris. I do feel like the little bit of spice. I'm not sure. Again, it's sort of that. It's not, Oscar De La Hoya and Ricardo Mayorga, but there is enough of a spice about it. And I also feel like Buatsi, we disagreed on this when I mentioned it to you. I don't think Buatsi's going to like people talking about it being a 50-50 fight and it being could go either way. I think Buatsi will be motivated by that to do a job on Azeez, and I think Buatsi will get the stoppage late in the fight, 10-11 in a good fight. But yeah, I think Buatsi will turn up on the night. I love both guys as well. We've got some great content coming out with them tomorrow with your mate Castillo. So look out for that. And they were both really good and both seemed in a really good place. But I just feel like Buatsi's going to turn up. And I think that additional injection of pace, I just want to see that. I just want to see that from Buatsi. And I think he will get the job done in the second half of the fight. So that's my only prediction. Barry's not here this week, and he actually got all the predictions right last week. He's been celebrating. He's been out on the piss. he had an accumulator on it, and he's been spending all of his money. But that brings to an end the show for today. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and particularly for the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World rescuing us at last minute because Barry's been out doing whatever, cavorting over in Phoenix. And thank you, of course, to our viewers for listening to us ramble on for the last couple of hours or so. Don't forget to let us know in the comments who you think will win. Will it be Joshua Buatsi? Will it be Dan Azeez? Let us know in the comments, and we'll catch up with you next time.